I would like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order. The next regular Board of Education meeting is on Tuesday, December 12th at 7:30 PM in the Board of Education meeting room. Thank you all for being here. I'll start with the chairperson's report. I hope everybody had a very happy Thanksgiving break and enjoyed some time away with friends and family, etc. Just before the break, I had an opportunity to attend the CAPE CAPS conference, CAPE Connecticut Association of Boards of Education and CAPS Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents. I attended I'm sure you'll hear more from Alan, and if Katie wants to pop in the board committee reports and talk about her experience there. But I attended a panel of the State Board of Education reps. They talked about their 5-point strategic plan. The first thing being teacher shortages. So it's nice to hear that the State Board of Ed is also talking about it. They talked about updating and streamlining the certification process. Charlene Russell Tucker, the education commissioner, was also there and talked about a program for Northeastern reciprocity and scholarships. And I certainly represented on behalf of Darien that how important teacher shortages are to us, and that is important as we think all the other initiatives are. Without the staff in place, we can't get the initiatives done that we want. The second component of their strategic plan is whole child / social emotional learning. The third portion is curriculum. The fourth portion is family engagement. And the fifth is career and workforce development, i.e. pathways and relevance for student learning. They also talked about COVID and the impact on attendance and the importance of academic recovery. Topics raised by Board of Ed members and superintendents in the audience included the number of bills raised by the legislature. It was around 900, and the frustration with that. Some frustration with things that are big and little, such as the finance class, which is classified as humanities and was put into place without any grandfathering. So no matter where you were in your academic career, kids have to take it. So an important thing for us to keep emphasizing when we speak with legislative members, that they need to be aware of students' academic careers. The ECS funding cliff for a number of districts are looking at was raised, and also the shortage of Spanish teachers. And of course, we know about that in our district, but some conversation about ways to make sure that folks who are Spanish speaking have easier entry pathways to entering the school system. I also sat on a panel for Tom Mooney's Nutmeg Board. That was a lot of fun. Tom is, as most of us know here, a fantastic teacher. So it was fun to see him in the room, walking a lot of new board members through a process. I'd also like to thank separately Robin Nelson and Greg Gramling for spending the morning with the school district staff, and Tom Mooney on training for their orientation as new board members. Thank you for doing that, especially right before the holiday weekend. As many of you know, and Julie will talk about this more, but I'm going to say it again myself, that our communications focus groups have been advertised. We are really hoping for some success. So again, Julie will say it again, but parents, if you're interested, please do attend. We know it's a busy time of year. The negotiations team is going to, or not the team, but John and Sarah will sit with Marge for some of the negotiations she has upcoming. And with that, we'll move on to public comment. Thank you.
Good evening. If anyone in person would like to participate, please wait for the chair to call you up to the podium. You'll have up to 3 minutes to comment. Please state your name and address for the record. Anyone in person?
Please just come to the podium. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time. My name is Jason Golden. I am at 37 Richmond Drive. I'm a concerned parent addressing an urgent matter regarding the safety and well-being of our students, particularly at the middle school. I'm a parent to 3 children here in Darien, moved to town primarily based on the reputation of the school system itself. Over the past few years, our family has experienced increasing concerns about the bullying environment at Middlesex. My son, who is on a 504 and IEP plan due to anxiety, has been treated to escalating bullying at Middlesex, including being called vulgar names, having his school supplies taken, kids swatting at his Chromebook, food being thrown at him, and being encouraged by his classmates to take his own life. The administration's inaction and the overall lack of discipline in our case has led us to the conclusion that MMS is an unsafe environment for our son and many other kids like him that the administration has negligently failed to protect. Any child's anxiety should be met with support and understanding, not isolation and coercion. I'm especially troubled to report an incident the Friday before Thanksgiving where my son was confined to a room for 90 minutes, accompanied by 3 staff members, and forced against his will to document names of some of the children who had been bullying him. We had expressed our concern to the administration about via email and via PPT meetings about his anxiety around bullying and the fear of retribution. And yet he was not allowed to call home until the administration had forced him to name names of these kids. This is not an approach that aligns with the supportive and nurturing environment we expect for our children. So I'm here to implore the Board of Education to consider the rampant bullying at Middlesex and to address the lack of responsiveness and empathy from the administration. Our children deserve a safe and compassionate learning environment, and it is our collective responsibility to ensure that they receive the support they need. I request the board consider how to prioritize the mental health and well-being of all of its students. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you for being here.
Anyone else in person? Please
Please.
come up.
Good evening. I'm Jackie Owens for Parsons Walk, and I'm reading the statement from the Darien Special Ed Parent Advisory Committee on behalf of us who are co-chairs. Thank you to Shirley and the Special Education Department for the detailed slides for tonight's presentation. The district data educational overview slide that shows the IEP categories. The other health impairment, so OHI, is the largest IEP category. It is crucial to know the breakdown of the disability categories within OHI, so we can have interventions within the district that are targeted to students suffering with a certain diagnosis based off an evidence-based and measurable program. More than half of the people with ADD and ADHD have comorbidities associated with it, such as anxiety and depression. We know from the latest Thriving Youth Darien survey results that 1 in 4 DHS students and 1 in 5 MMS students report persistent anxiety in the past year. This is of importance so we can create targeted professional training for not only our psychologists, but our special ed and general ed teachers, so we can have appropriate support strategies for these students, such as a training certificate in executive functioning skills. Excuse me. The second largest category under IEPs are learning disabilities. Well, there is no breakdown. It's under my understanding that it should be SLD, which is for dyslexia and other reading disabilities. This information would be helpful to our district to know these diagnoses in full breakout, so we can use research-based reading interventions to help these kids succeed. We also would like to have an update on how many SRBI reading specialists and special ed teachers are being certified in OG and other research-based specialized literacy programs. For those of you who don't know, these are targeted programs for kids with dyslexia and other reading disabilities. And also, what percentage of kids have an IEP? Also, you have to obviously have a primary diagnosis, but what percent also have a secondary disability on their IEP? And are we tracking that? So again, comorbidities are so important because these not only stay with kids in their whole academic career, but lifelong. And if we can tackle this early on, hopefully we can start to not have these kids suffer lifelong. The IEP enrollment trends.
You are just about at time.
Shows a large increase of students with IEPs. So there's more need for specialized teachers and professionals, not just paraprofessionals who are not certified.
Okay, thank you.
And then, well, let me just end in saying that the future professional development topics for teachers and staff Really, we must acknowledge the diversity changes in our town, especially ESL families,
Ma'am.
and there
I
are
can't let-
diversity. That is
Maybe Tricia can
important.
finish for you, but
to-
I cannot.
To destigmatize receiving special ed and support services. Thank you.
Hi, Tricia Bresnahan. I live at 11 Glenville Avenue, and I'm speaking on behalf of Darien CPAC this evening. We would also, can you provide an update on PD for inclusion co-taught pairs at MMS and DHS since the district consultant has not been available for a couple of years? Will the district hire a new consultant? And can you give an update on the fifth grade co-taught classes? How will the successfulness of the co-taught classes be evaluated? Regarding the transition steering committee update, would you consider adding a parent to the committee for a parent perspective on post-secondary transition? And in addition to looking at cohort needs, are you looking at best practices and best outcomes for students with disabilities and post-secondary educational opportunities as these cohorts and their needs will continue to change over the years? Is there anyone on the transition steering committee with experience with inclusive college programs and paid job and careers? And is the college and career support system for students with disabilities in the district equitable to the system in place for non-disabled peers? Is there professional development for guidance counselors and special education staff on inclusive post-secondary programs across the U.S.? There are more than 300 inclusive post-secondary programs around the country for students with developmental and intellectual disabilities, and even more for those on the autism spectrum. This is of great importance because for the 98% of adults with an intellectual disability who don't go to college, only 15% have paid employment in the community. However, a post-secondary inclusive college program in North Carolina reports that 90% of their students have full-time employment after they leave. Our district should be following all students post-high school to measure the effectiveness of programs and the success of students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in person? If anyone online would like to participate, please use the raised hand icon. There are no raised hands at this time.
Thank you very much. All right, with that, I'll turn to the superintendent's report. Dr. Adley.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here and also online. Thank you, Ms. McCammon and Ms. Loveland, for representing the board at the last week's Caps Cave Convention. Two of the keynote addresses were AI, the use of AI in classrooms, that was presented by an MIT professor. And then the other one was delivered by a national board of education on boards communication plans, which was an interesting, given our discussions, it was an interesting address. Thank you to Mrs. McCammon for sitting on the board, nutmeg board, appreciate it. To our students, 308, unfortunately I could not attend that given I was at the Caps Cave Convention for a couple of days, but I want to congratulate the cast and crew, Brenna, for the dining room. I heard everything went very well, so congratulations on that. A special welcome to Dr. Harry Lobb to the district. Dr. Lobb is, as you know, the new Ox Ridge interim principal. I want to thank the members of the community who came out, the parent community who came out and give him a warm welcome. There's a few cheers for him there. And we have another parent meet and greet in the near future. Also want to thank and congratulate some of our teams in the past week or two. Our girls swim teams were the state champions, the field hockey FIC champions, and the girls volleyball, both FCIAC and state champions. So congratulations to all of our teams. The Turkey Bowl wasn't the score we maybe wanted, but I want to thank the kids, our student athletes, for their effort and their resilience, and also to the fans, the spectators, and everybody, the two communities who went for making it a fun tradition and a fun kickoff to the holiday weekend. We do have two Spanish teachers, one at Oxbridge and Tokenique, who started last week, and they will do the transition until January 1st when the permanent Spanish teachers will be taking over. The Darien Music Department is working closely with the Darien Music for Youth for a tenor and bass showcase on November 30th. John Raskoff, who was on our board as a student rep, will come back as part of the Yale repertoire. Grades 4 through 12 in the district will be performing along with John and the members of the Yale ensemble. And you can look up the information on the website and get tickets there. Parent and staff focus groups, as the chair had said, were scheduled for this week. We ended up rescheduling those for either the week of January 15th or the 22nd. In fairness, any parent, we had more of a concern of not being able to get people. Any parent who wants to be on one of these committees can be on one of those committees completely. And I want to recognize the PTOs and CDSP, because we did say at the communications committee that we go through these groups. In fairness, their notice didn't go out till Wednesday morning, given it probably takes 2 weeks for them to pull things together, the holiday and everything else on top of it, and elementary conferences. Probably a bad move on my part to schedule it for them and then notice it by then. So we will give people plenty of notice. If there's anybody that you know who wants to be part of it, believe me, it doesn't have to be 15, it can be 16, it can be 20 people. I don't think we're going to have a problem creating space for any member of the community. So if you know of anybody who wants to participate, they can certainly mention to me too. And I'm sure the PTOs will be inclusive in that. So we're not going to schedule it before the holiday. It's just not reasonable to do that. And we want to get a good turnout. So it will be for either the week of the 15th or the week of the 22nd. Just waiting to hear from Cape on that. Elementary conference days, thank you for those people who are our parents. We know our parents support education and they turn out in droves for the conferences. And we thank them for that, because the partnership is extremely important to their children, our students. So thank you to our teachers too, who are working, preparing for these conferences for this week. The Science of Reading Raver, we're all patiently waiting to Friday to see what we hear from the state. I'm sure they know by now, but I understand that it should be arriving on Friday, so we'll pass that along as soon as we possibly can. And the Board of Education Curriculum Committee is scheduled for the 7th. Tour of the schools, just a reminder, is next Saturday. So for all board members, if you can be available that day, we walk through and look at the capital projects that are on the schedule. The RTM State of the Town is December 11th, and the next Board of Education meeting is December 12th.
Student representative reports, Waha and Brenna.
Good evening. I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving break. I know I can speak for most high schoolers when I say that it was well needed and greatly appreciated. It was also a reading weekend, so we didn't have any homework or tests coming back into school, which is nice. So Q2 is off to a solid start. However, the student government plan bonfire was canceled a second time due to the rain, which is unfortunate. But hopefully we'll have some more events planned in the winter.
Yeah, and thank you so much to everyone who came out and saw the dining room. It was a fantastic production, and I'm so grateful to have had a part in it. And we also want to congratulate all of our sports teams, and we want to cheer on our boys football team. They're currently playing right now against, I believe, Naugatuck. So we wish them the best. And we also have a band concert next Thursday, December 7th. And an SAT on Saturday. So we wish everyone the best of luck. And thank you all so much.
Thank you. Okay, approval of the minutes. We have a motion to approve the minutes of the special meeting, organizational meeting, and regular meeting held on November 14th, 2003. That's Dave, seconded by Julie. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay. Board committee reports. Dennis, you want to kick us off?
Sure. The Facilities Committee held a meeting on the 21st of November to discuss the capital plan for 2024-25 session. We also discussed briefly the Middlesex Middle School roofs and Darien High School roofs. And as well as Dr. Adley said, we will have a tour of the schools on the 9th of December.
Thank you. Anybody else? No. All right. Presentations and discussions. Discussion and possible acceptance of contemplated gift from the Darien High School Parents Association is done.
So
Here today.
Mrs. Dunn is at the football game. I don't know if anybody's got a score update from that game, but she is there with the athletic director. So I'm presenting this on behalf of the high school principal. This is from the PTO, and it is for new furniture for the wellness center. It represents a number of spaces, gathering space, a quieter space with softer furniture, cafe space, and an art and activity area. So this is just over $10,000. Discussed this with our facilities director, and also it was approved by our mental health director, Dr. Dad. So if you want to just scroll through that relatively quickly. It just represents some of the furniture that they're purchasing.
Okay, with profound thanks to the PTOs for their generosity, I'll turn it over to the board for any questions. Julie.
Very generous gift. I had occasion to be in high school on Tuesday before Thanksgiving break, and was grabbed and brought over just to see what was going on in the wellness center. And the place was hopping. They were making gratitude rocks. There was so much going on there. It was really terrific to see firsthand in the middle of that. And I will help them to do that.
Anything else? Thank you, Julie. All right. May I have a motion to accept the contemplated gift from the Darien High School Parents Association? Robin, seconded by Sarah. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you to the DHSPA. Okay. Update on implementation of district strategic plan and board goals, Dr. Adley and Dr. Fedigan.
So this is one of the times of the year where we give a periodic update to the board on the board goals and also the strategic plan. The way it's set out, you can see what the board goals are, the strategic work that was aligned, and the measures. We didn't put the measures in the strategic plan only because there was a lot of them to complete by the end of the year, and just for formatting purposes or otherwise. But given that the board goals were fairly concise, we represented them here. There will be, if you've noticed, there is redundancy in this package because the board goals also dovetail and support the strategic plan. So there's an understandable coherence between them and repetitiveness in some cases between them. So I will put a couple of highlights, but with that, if you want me to go through the first one with a couple of highlights, I can pause, or I can go through them all and then just field questions at whatever way you would like to do that.
I think goal by goal, but I like your idea of just hitting the highlights.
Right, okay, so the first one is around wellness and safety, and a lot of that is around school security, update, mental health awareness, and we already have a presentation this evening in the executive session, and there will be another presentation on school safety in schedule for January. We have completed the self-assessment for the accreditation for school safety. We're working on the climate survey to be as an important item to survey across the district. There's been a significant number of trainings that have been done by Dr. Dad with many different staff, from support staff, special education staff, tenations, regular education staff, and actually some other staff from other districts have come and availed themselves of that. It's been nice to do that. So that's been around DBT training primarily. We continue to participate with the town and the collaboration with the town on their postvention team. And we're continuing to implement the roller. So I will pause there. We did just administer the Decimini universal screener, and their attributes sort of align to our report cards. So we'll be looking for perseverance in students and so on, and so those are the type of attributes, but we have to see what the results of those actually reveal at this point. But those are a couple of takeaways on the first goal.
Just quickly on the DESM&E, do you have any idea? I know that we were sent emails if we wanted to opt our children out of that. Do you have any sense of how many parents took that up?
I can't actually recall the exact number, but we
Was
can
it
get
like a
that.
handful? Was it dozens? Was it hundreds? Like just.
No, it
curious.
wasn't hundreds.
Yeah.
No,
okay.
I want to say it was around, I don't want to get hold of me. I think it was 50 or 60 or so. It was what I
Yes,
can,
it was less than 5%.
right.
In each of the schools, and in some cases, if I might just add, oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for the reminder, Shirley. In some cases, it was really like the number of students might be deceiving because it might be multiple students from the same household that are making that decision. But we can certainly provide that
I was just
information to the
curious.
board. We have it broken down both ways. So if that's something the board would like, we can share that.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay.
Julie?
Thank you. Preparing for the January 24 launch of anonymous alerts application. I think that was going to come back to us. Will we see that again on an agenda prior to that date from our last
Yeah.
discussion at our retreat? I think.
Yeah,
that's
you will
reflected.
like, nothing is going to go out until it comes back to the board with a full package of timelines, communications. So we're still working through that. And if we don't hit that date because we're not ready for that date, then we will wait until we are ready. So, but we're moving along with that very nicely, actually. But I want to make sure that that is fully completed beforehand.
Greg?
This is more of a just general question as relates to all of the different goals, but is there like a specific timeline for the goals or like a benchmark or something for now we know we're at the finish line, or are these more just like ongoing?
That's actually a good question in terms of just sort of fill in maybe new board members. These are annual board goals. Typically, that is what the board does. It sets annual board goals. So these metrics are to be completed by the end of the year. That's the hope. Some of them are, some of them aren't, some of them are revised as we go, but it is a 1 year goal.
Okay, so yeah, so we're getting close to the end of the year, so we'll be revisiting and, school year.
School year.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Just
Robin?
one question. Are the metrics you're referring to the measures
Yes,
that are
yes,
listed here?
correct.
And those are just an annual kind of metric data point that we would be using to measure how we've achieved?
For this particular year, yes. So the board typically will start this discussion. It could be prior to the summer, or it could be during the summer retreat, where it first gets to the first draft of the goals and it revises, contributes to them.
Okay, and then this is getting ahead a little bit, but the strategic plan, you made a brief mention that you left out what the measures were, but it would be, I guess, as a new board member, I apologize because I haven't seen what the data is that we're using to measure how we're doing against the strategic plan goals. We can talk about that.
We can talk
as
about that
to
when we get there. Yeah. But thank you though.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the first goal? Okay, Alan?
So goal 2 is really, we're revising the budget to include 5-year projection rollout. We revised the project calendar. We also put in presentations that the board had sort of put in line, so to speak, over the last year to review Genius R and different other topics along the way. But that's really all about the preparation for this year's budget that has some modifications, including the whole digitizing the budget process.
Any questions? Okay.
So this goal 3 talked about supporting the implementation of the strategic plan. So we'll talk about the strategic plan when we get to that shortly. And the vision of the graduate. So the vision of the graduate has been adopted. It is being implemented as part of all of the school improvement plans. So it's an integral part of that particular process. It's being embedded in the EduPlanet curriculum software. And we're creating we're trying to create assessments that sort of align to the vision of the graduate at this particular point. Okay. So we're just trying to create some alignment around the work. I'm pleased to say that K through 12, that you can see some of this occurring.
Julie?
Thank you. the language whole school goal was new to me. I can kind of guess at what it means, but is that a new term?
It's just part of the goal for the for a particular school improvement plan.
So each of the 7 schools or?
Yes.
Okay, have a whole school goal?
Yep.
Robin, just one question. When you were mentioning here that we are creating assessments that measure the VOG competencies, I would assume that when we're changing assessments or curriculum, we're not removing what we're teaching now. We might be adding to the assessments to ensure that we are helping to inspire some of these competencies, but we're still focused really on assessing the actual learning, right? So for English, math, science, et cetera, and okay.
Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive ideas, and also we have current assessments that actually align to this. Well, part of it is just sort of initially collecting assessments that actually do align to some of the attributes.
Okay, thank you.
Go for.
Well, go forward, we're talking about the communication plan. So from the establishment of the committee to the development of a communication plan, a lot of this revolves around the work of that particular committee.
Questions?
The district logo is under design. So we should have a wee draft pretty soon to have a wee look at.
Just, I wasn't here obviously when this was being put in place, but I didn't see like the faculty or teachers in here in terms of communication. Like how was that thought about in terms of like, you've got most of the other constituencies, but not like, I don't know, maybe the most important one.
Yeah, the staff is in here in terms of identified the strategic work. Yes, they are included in this in terms of focus groups, feedback, survey feedback that they give. They've already participated in that, but yes.
There's,
Well,
do you mean more, Greg, do you mean more like teachers communicating out to their parents of their students, or what are you thinking about?
or administrators to teachers.
I guess just general interaction with the teachers and giving them a voice.
Yeah, so I guess that the voice that we're trying to give the teachers is a wee bit the same as the parents at this point. Opportunity to participate in how do we improve communication? What would you like to see? They participated in the survey. They're participating in the focus groups. So as in a participatory procedure, they'll be as involved as anybody.
Yeah, like some kind of feedback loop where teachers, I mean, I would think that teachers are probably one of the best people to identify problems and issues within the school. And so allowing them to voice their opinions or voice issues and getting ahead of that. That's kind of what I was thinking of.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was just going to chime in just to make sure that you know that there is a specific focus group for faculty and staff, and the focus groups that we'll do in January now and continue to build on what we can learn from them. And it would be great to get ideas from the faculty on how they could be more involved or would like to be more involved. So I think it's a great point.
That's great.
I think at the same time, if we look at our strategic work, we don't necessarily call out teachers in the way that you're speaking to. So as we, evaluate the goal, that's probably an area of work that we could take a look at and see whether or not it's appropriately represented, even though, yes, there is certainly representation on the focus groups, et cetera. Robin.
This is kind of building on that, and this might be related more to the strategic plan goals around communication. But one thing that I had noticed is that, just the same as we have elementary school parent-teacher conferences where parents really have an opportunity to get one-on-one feedback on how their child's doing it, on a quarterly basis. It did make me think about what we do for parents that have middle school children or high school children, because to some extent you really lose that community, that connection and opportunity to have one-on-one conversations with your children. You just get a report card.
Yeah.
And there's no qualitative feedback anymore like there was in elementary school. And personally, I would love to see something in our goals or strategic plan to help address that, especially for general ed students who might not have, they don't have the specific learning plans or PPT groups where they can really have a one-on-one conversation. I think this is something that we could potentially work on helping to improve for parents to have that opportunity and that feedback loop.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
And the final goal was of the oversight of the building committees. And from our chair sitting on the HHR building committee as one of the chairs, co-chairs, to the completion of the Ox Ridge. So we did have we had personnel change recently there, but we did have a very successful open of the physical school building along with the dedication ceremony. The HHR building project is on a different schedule that was communicated out to families. We're going to have to continue to communicate about where we are with that. It's probably a good time actually to give them a wee update there, but we have been appreciate the work of the two committees in particular and our parents and their support because there was a wee bit of a change, particularly with the HHR schedule. But those have been, and we report back here to the board on a regular basis about our building projects. I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's a short summary of it. Yes.
Robin.
Just one additional question, I guess, and I'm new to this process, but to the extent that you're mentioning that the Board of Ed goals are very intertwined and tied to the strategic plan, what I was surprised by is that there's no Board of Ed goal related to the first strategic plan goal of enhancing teaching and learning. And I know that one of the Board of Ed goals is to support the implementation of the strategic plan, but given the importance of enhancing teaching and learning, I would think that one of the important goals of the Board of Ed would be to have some kind of a goal that could be used or utilized to help prioritize that from the Board of Ed perspective. And that's just a comment. I don't know if operationally that really works, but it was just something I thought I wanted to mention.
There's some truth in that, and there's just some how it's represented on the paper in that, because the board goals are meant to be the goals that we as a board are responsible for, and because we don't do the direct implementation of the teaching and learning, while it's a priority for us, that's why it shows up in the strat plan, because we don't directly implement. Whereas communication, we have a different role, or with the building, our interface with the building committees, the role is slightly different. So that's part of the difference. At the same time, I think your point is taken, and when we have another update on this component of it, teaching and learning can just as easily show up in some of the things that are happening, inside of that goal 3 of ours.
Right.
At the same time, we don't want to repeat too much, but I do think it's important. It is something that we critically support and care deeply about. So thank you for raising it.
So that does, in the past, there's been a wee bit more explicitly, being a bit more explicit about a teaching and learning goal, but here talking about year 3 of the strategic plan, so it talks directly to supporting teaching and learning year 3 in the strategic plan. So, which is a good transition now to Amy, because that's the first one that she'll address. So we did say that the strategic plan, we just didn't list all of the measurements of the strategic plan, not because other reason other than just sort of presentation, and there was a lot of them. The strategic plan for anybody in the community is the original plan is listed is depicted on the website as a document, and you can see the original, and then you can see this particular version. This strategic plan, from a board's point of view, has been a very alive document. It's been revised. It continues to be revised. Some things we hit on, some things we miss on, some things are changed. And the board spent a lot of time, each year spends a lot of time updating the strategic plan, revising the strategic plan. So it's always a sort of a live document, and it holds the administration accountable and itself accountable to adhere to the strategic plan and support the strategic plan. So I thank the board for that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Amy to lead off on the teaching and learning.
Thank you, Dr. Adley. Very much inherent in teaching and learning is this idea of plan, do, monitor, and adjust. So when we think about the strategic plan, and to Mr. Gremling's earlier question, when are you meant to finish these things? Some things you might see year over year, like safety drills and plans at schools, right? That's something that would carry over. But then there are more finite goals that we would expect to complete according to a timeline. And the strategic plan is written from 21 to 26. And alongside each of those major focus areas, there's an indication of what year we're meant to be really focusing on that particular piece of the plan. So as Dr. Adley mentioned, we'll just give a few highlights. And this is another, I think, wonderful example where you'll see the general education efforts in our school system and the efforts of SCSS or special education really dovetailing. So Shirley and I will kind of speak to anything that the board may have a question to with regard to our work in this area. The first thing that I'd like to draw the board's attention to is the PDEC committee, which stands for Professional Development and Evaluation Committee. We've reconstituted the membership there, and that is namely because there is a much more, I guess, rigorous expectation for the community this year because we're meant to revise our teacher and educator evaluation and support plan along with the rest of the state, Connecticut State Department of Education. So the state will produce a model for districts to use, but I don't anticipate that that will be available until late spring, and we certainly can't wait that long. So I am pleased to share with the board at this point that we have reconstituted the membership. We have, I would say, an estimated 50 members. And to Mr. Gremling's other point about teacher voice, there are teachers from every discipline and every level on that group that were very eager. We had a really robust conversation just days before the Thanksgiving break about what we should be thinking about that will really work to drive teaching and learning and student outcomes and staff experiences in our school system. So we'll continue to keep the board apprised of that as it's developed, that plan, because it's meant to come forward to the board as a proposal and then for the board's approval after it's reviewed by Dr. Adley, of course. So that is forthcoming. Another update in this area is the instructional rounds process, and instructional rounds is really taken root from the medical fields, and as far as like doctors take rounds within a hospital to learn in real time and practice about their work. It's really, this work is also generated out of the Harvard School of Education, and it's long been viewed as like action research and a high leverage professional learning opportunity. So we have engaged our staff, again, probably 50 staff members or so, different from the PDEC group, some the same, some overlap, to engage in an instructional rounds professional learning session earlier this month. And then in the month of December, we will have a time to apply our learning as an administrative and teacher team, where we'll have an elementary instructional rounds experience and a secondary rounds experience at Darien High School. So we're looking forward to that opportunity for teachers and administrators to learn side by side. We also want to make sure that everybody is aware that the learning principles that the PDEC committee established last year, of course, those will resurface and be a part of our plan to guide the work of the revision of the teacher evaluation plan in district. I'm very happy to report that the administrators, mostly the department chairs, and I have worked together to develop a curriculum revision cycle that will have us making sure that the curriculum is fresh, aligned to standards, but also so we can anticipate what we're meant to be working on as a school system. Obviously, that's responsive to standards, but from a budgetary perspective and a systemic planning perspective, ELP through grade 12, we should be able to forecast that work out in a way that shows efficiencies and intentionality across the system. So I'm sure through the budget process, you'll have the chance to see that in a little bit more detail. Alongside a curriculum revision cycle, we'll be developing that curriculum revision calendar. We'll be able to provide an update around what's already in EduPlanet and what is the pace of the work moving forward. I know that's been a good question of the board to our administration. Shirley and I continue to look at universal design for learning and think about our own necessary learning in that area to lead that work in district. We know that that's a priority, especially as we revise curriculum right from the start. So we will have, I would anticipate, more of an update in that area the next time we come before the board. And that really, I think, is work that will be a focus area more so as we go into this next budget season and the next school year. We have provided a great deal of professional learning, both during obviously our opening days. Today I was in a meeting with our elementary team planning out through February and into March. And the professional learning is really to support the work pre-K through 12 across the departments and to ensure that our SCSS colleagues are involved right from the beginning. So that has been happening. And as you know, we have a tri-state visit planned in January, focusing on our work in the area of fine arts. Mrs. Droller and I continue to work with our gifted teachers, the teachers in the IDEA program, to pilot some units in 8th grade to refresh and revise that curriculum. And we're also looking at that, by the way, at the elementary level. So that is the bulk of the work and what's to note for this first period of reporting and enhancing teaching and learning.
Board questions?
Katie.
Thank you, Dr. Fedigan. That's very exciting. One question for you regarding the bullet point on the timetable and the calendar for the unit development. Is that in here, there's a word systemic. Is that so that each of the classrooms, each of the 5 elementaries are kind of doing things at the same time? Or can you just speak a little bit by what the calendar and the timeline mean there?
Sure. So we want to make sure, obviously, that we have an assured core curriculum so that students, as they move from grade level to grade level, have assured experiences and coherent learning experiences as they progress through the system, knowing also that we trust our teachers to make responsive decisions based on the needs of the learners right in front of them. But it's also because we want to make sure that we're creating a through line between a student's experience in ELP through grade 12 plus. So when we think about redesigning or writing curriculum, for example, in world language, pre-K through grade 5, that should inform our work at 6-8, should inform the work at 9-12. There are new social studies standards that have just been released. So we'll have to think about what is our timetable as students move through the school system to ensure that the curriculum is ready for the students as they're arriving at each next level. So that's another piece of it.
Thank you. If I can just follow up on that. So question on how, I appreciate that you mentioning that being responsive to the students in front and how we differentiate and how we respond to that. So how would you respond, or how would a teacher then respond and catch up? Like, what's the process if, let's say, they're doing a unit and the students just aren't getting it, and the teacher says, you know what, we need to spend more time on this. I had planned this, for the next week or the next month. What's kind of the process and support in terms of making sure that the kids are getting the foundation that they need, but also that we are hitting all that core curriculum you just mentioned?
So part of the answer to that is looking at our assessments. So when we think about assessing students in real time or benchmark, or whether it's universal screener or benchmarking, using that assessment to drive our instruction, because we can't just simply go by what the calendar dictates or what the lesson, the scope of a unit dictates, because sometimes the students in front of you may already have those concepts, right? So we don't want to it's like having children sit in shoes that don't fit them anymore. So you don't want to just stay so rotely connected to the curriculum document if the students need something different, meaning they don't have some prerequisite skills or content, or conversely, they already have some of those skills and content. And then that's not an effective and efficient use of student, and instructional time. So it's really important, and we rely upon our teachers to make those choices based on the standards and kind of the scope and sequence of what the curriculum articulates over the course of a year. That makes sense. And partially that's through conversation with administration, with their grade level leaders, certainly through their PLC time, which is incredibly important. That should be teacher driven, and time for teachers to be asking these really good questions about what they're seeing from the kids in front of them. And also their work with the interventionists as well, and special education colleagues. You're welcome.
Amy, from PDEC, what is the approximate timeline, given that we have to approve by the 1st of July?
So that is something that we decided together when PDEC met days before Thanksgiving. And it's our goal to have for the early May Board of Education meeting at the latest, the plan for the board's consideration. And certainly we're happy to provide updates along the way so that there isn't a surprise reveal. At the end, we should be able to provide information as that's in development.
Okay, thank you very much.
But one of the major hopes of that plan is to provide increased opportunity for teacher voice to drive professional learning, and teacher voice for goal setting, and to really be thinking about being responsive to student and staff needs. It's really the intent behind the state's allowing districts this opportunity. There are guardrails too.
Okay.
So they're not.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions on this goal? No? Okay.
All right, now remember to advance this slide. Okay, so that might be my favorite goal to talk about. Although they're important, the teaching and learning one is pretty near and dear to my heart. So moving on to all of the other favorite goals. So the second one is really around promoting wellness, diversity, and inclusion. And again, as a parent and educator, this is incredibly important. We need our students to be ready to learn as they come to school. So we've very fortunate to have Dr. Alicia Dadd helping to lead this work in district. We continue to implement the ruler approach, which is not really a curriculum. It's more of an approach with some strategies that we can use to help children recognize the emotions that they're having so that they can work through those emotions and be ready to learn and have productive school days, which are skills we want them to take with them post-secondary. And we heard about some talk about post-secondary experiences for our learners tonight. There's a new focus this year on new strategies. So beyond the mood meter, we're also moving to MetaMoment. And of course, the board is already mostly, I think, aware of schools developing charters. And if not, I'm happy to provide the board with more information about that. Dr. Dadd has been providing very, I would say, individualized parent workshops. Not the most efficient way to do it. In other words, she could have provided whole district workshops, but she's really wanting to get to know each of the individual school learning communities. So she's spending time having individual workshops to support student and parent communities in each of our 7 schools. So those I know have been recorded. I know there has one that took place, I think, recently at Holmes, and we've gotten very good feedback for those. We've already spoken tonight about the DESA. We'll follow up giving the board the information about opt-outs. As Dr. Adley mentioned, most of the indicators, that DESA mini is a very brief universal screener assessment. It's like a minute to administer. And it would flag if we needed to administer a longer, more detailed screener beyond that. Last year, it's my understanding, and because we've just finished the assessment this year, that there really were no surprises. The students that flagged as students that might need more support were already known by colleagues in the SESS department, by the administration, and by the general education teachers. The indicators on that screen are very well aligned to the indicators that you would see on the report card that are not this content standard indicators, but more of the other attributes about kind of habits and behaviors of learning and attitudes of learning. We continue to support our schools and communities with professional learning for responsive classroom. I agree with Julie, the Wellness Center is a happening place. I've been there myself, and I'm grateful for the boards and communities' continued support of that space for our students. I think our students here have also mentioned several times their experiences in that space. The Thriving Youth results, we continue to work with these local organizations to make sure that we're ensuring supports for our whole child in school and out, providing the most support we can. And the school climate survey, we've settled on a school climate survey, but what we need to do now is narrow down on the indicators or questions that we think would be most helpful to inform board goals, to inform the strategic plan, to inform our improvement efforts. So we will continue to provide updates in that area to the board. Also, to an earlier question, those surveys are meant to be administered not only to parents, but also to children, typically in grades 3 through 12, and also to our staff as well. So that's another opportunity for staff to provide feedback. That's how we learn to improve. SEL School Climate Steering Committee, I know Mrs. Klein and I are very grateful for Dr. Dadd and Dr. McCarthy's leadership in that work. And part of that is really thinking about what are the core experiences that our children need to have so that we don't get to the point where we're having to implement so many interventions and other supports, right? Like what can we offer within our core programming at each grade level, elementary, middle, and high? So that's another area that we'll look to continue to provide additional updates to the board. And we just also have Dr. Dadd supporting beyond the academic areas of the athletic programs. I'm working with coaches and students there. So among many other things, those are some of the highlights I would draw the board's attention to.
So just as we've been talking through these different strategic plan goals, it seems like there's kind of 2 components to this. One is like the implementation of standardized processes and procedures, which really could outlive these goals and you kind of put them in place and then they go forever or they go for, a long period of time. And the other, which is really the crux of the question, is like the measurable objectives for these different plans. And like looking at, you talked about the school climate survey, like that could be a good example. Like, is there something that we're looking for in terms of the response rates and like what's success? Like, how are we defining success with that? Is it looking at it and then doing it again and seeing improvement? Is it benchmarking versus other communities in Fairfield County? Like, how are we defining success so that we know we have actually achieved the goal, or are we just doing it just to see what's going on?
So we're definitely not doing it just to see what's going on, although it is important to have a pulse of a community and what people's experiences are. We want to be doing these things to drive improvement, right, of experience of students and staff and families. So with the survey, there are some times where you would look to have a benchmark and measure a change over time from beginning of the year to end. I also would caution us to think about having multiple measures to document whether it's our progress toward a goal or our achievement of a goal. So I would be looking to other things like attendance rates. I would be looking to performance on assessments, internal assessments and standardized assessments out beyond our internal assessments in Darien Public Schools. I'd be looking to feedback from the staff. I'd be looking to, information that Marge from the HR department has about our staff experiences. So I think we'd want to be looking at multiple measures and be thinking about how each of those measures might inform decision-making.
And those seem like really smart ways that you can use those going forward as leading indicators,
right,
for what's happening in the school system and actually track those. But like, I don't see those on this presentation. I think it'd be really helpful to see what some of those are as we're thinking about this so that we can take that into account for next year's strategic plan.
Sure, I appreciate the question. Another way to look at this too, that we might consider is thinking about leading and lagging indicators and different measures and what the leading and lagging indicators might be of those.
And this is kind of building on, this is what I was getting to before. I mean, it would be really helpful to have the data, even highlights of data set, the turnover percentage, the trends that we could look at, not just a point in time, but the trends over the years as we do this, so that you can identify if we're seeing a downward trend in a metric that we want to be improving, that we can then drill down into it to figure out, do we need to reprioritize something in the strategic plan further so that we can try to improve something that we're not getting what we want. And that's kind of what I was looking at for it. I know this is year 3 but the data, just to have something along the lines of whenever we give these updates, kind of a quick view of the stats that would kind of align with some of these things, just to give us a little bit of a trend to show kind of here's how we're doing.
Yeah, I'm a big nerd. I love looking at the data.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the question. And I would anticipate that our dashboard of data that we're looking at as a board and administration will likely grow or change over time, right? Based on our needs and what we're looking to improve.
I love that word dashboard. I think this is wonderful, and it's a lot of wonderful words. It describes a tremendous amount of work, but I think the board has over time talked a little bit about measurement and would like the dashboard concept to be integrated into some of this. So for future. Dave and then Robin.
Yeah.
Pardon me, I'm definitely jumping on this bandwagon, but I'm going to focus on the first point, continued implementation of Ruler. I'm thinking implementation in of itself is not a goal, but actually it's the purported benefits that'll come from the Ruler program. I know implementation seems to have been very successful because we've heard from certain parents that it's become almost cult-like at some of the schools with the giant mood meters. We're getting to the point where kids are just, perhaps becoming victimized or are at the point where they just check out and don't pay any attention, think this stuff is a joke. So one, I'd like to know, are we actually getting any of the benefits we thought we would get? And I don't need that answered now. But 2, should we continue implementing, or maybe we should slow down a little bit and take a look at that as well?
Robin.
And then I also had a question, just to the extent that this is a goal of fostering a culture that promotes wellness. One thing that I don't see as much of an emphasis on is the supports, for instance, the academic supports within the classroom. If children need additional support or they're looking for additional help, how are we promoting that wellness and caring environment within a classroom to the extent that, maybe we make it a little bit more extensive, or we make sure that all of our new students know that there are tutoring opportunities available, or we have academic centers or different parts of, you know, the middle school or high school where they can go for additional support, or that teachers keep office hours available. And I know that they do this maybe more so in the middle school, but, you know, just to make sure that the students have full information so that it doesn't become a stress and an anxiety if they feel like they're not doing as well in their classes as they would like, and they know how they can get the support that they need. Because I do think that kids here are under a lot of pressure and academic pressure that can build stress and anxiety. And so to the extent that we can have in here something that's more of a support system specific around that, I think that could be helpful too.
And part of that is helping children from a young age, being able to identify those emotions and to be able to regulate them so that they can manage it and be productive and learn and carry on with what they're supposed to. And also recognize the feelings that they're having.
Dave.
I guess following up on that, you know, I hear about supports, I hear about wellness. I don't know how any of this promotes sort of resilience or self-reliance or, you know, independence, or you fail a few times, you build some successes, you gain confidence that way. Is that happening here at all? And I just don't know how you track that at all, but, you know, that's something I certainly think we should be considering.
Absolutely. And some of what you just described, I think, is really well articulated in the vision of the graduate. Definitely a focus area. But we can continue to focus on that and be more explicit.
Julie. Oh, Julie.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to say I'm happy to see that we are addressing 2B as well, and that there will be a group gathering to discuss the DEI team report in December, and I look forward to hearing more on that in the coming months. Thank you.
Can you walk through what is in that line item? Alan?
Yes, so the recommendations in the actual strategic plan, it talks about and this is something that the board looked at and changed specifically the word for it, to look at the prioritized considerations and bring those back to the board. So that is what the administration is doing, is looking at the various considerations of each of those in each of those particular areas and prioritizing those and bringing them back to the board for consideration of implementation.
Thank you. Brenna.
I just want to thank everyone again for your continued support and all that you do for us students. And what I'm wondering is if we can maybe work to reimagine our extracurricular meetings as they stand. I think it's really powerful that we can bring together so many members of our student body. And what I'm wondering is, can we, reimagine those meetings to maybe greater pinpoint and greater achieve the goals that we have? I recognize among many students, they feel that these meetings can be a bit maybe deviating from really what we're trying to accomplish, and also they can just be a bit of a chore, and maybe kids aren't paying attention, and it's just really I really believe that since we're bringing everyone together, that's a really great opportunity to harness all that energy and all that momentum that we have together. And I think that there's some ways, I may not have the answers yet, but I think that there's many ways that we can greater streamline those meetings.
Thank you, Brenna. Anyone else? Okay. Goal 3.
Okay, goal 3 is vision of the graduate. And so one of the things that I'd like to draw the board's attention to is a real intentional focus within each of the school improvement plans to articulate the work across the 7 schools on vision of the graduate. Our tri-state visit that's focusing in the area of fine arts will help us think about vision of the graduate in those areas. And already the attributes or competencies of the vision of the graduate are embedded into EduPlanet 21, but it's not enough to just kind of click, which competencies are being addressed. We have to be more thoughtful about how they're being addressed, and that happens with curriculum writing and curriculum revision and curriculum development. So that is something that is ongoing. To the earlier question, curriculum revision is something that You want to be thinking about finishing a curriculum project and plan, but then making sure that you're continuing to look at it, to look at the effectiveness and any other needs of the community or new standards it may have, that would be an impetus for change. We did conduct, it was actually Dr. Dad who conducted focus groups. She referenced these in an earlier report about students' experiences toward vision of the graduate competencies based upon their experience through Darien Public Schools. I watched that video, and I would encourage anyone who hasn't to watch it and hear what our students have said about their experiences. They're very wise, and we can be learning from them a great deal about our work moving forward. And we continue to think about, and Robin mentioned this a little bit before, when we think about curriculum and revising curriculum, absolutely that's when we have to think about our assessments, because the assessment is a measure of student progress and performance, but also effectiveness to some extent of the curriculum. So those are part and parcel.
Questions on this one? Great.
Just, I know, Dr. Ali, you mentioned that the strategic plan is a living and breathing document. Should we think about the vision of the graduate as being the same thing, where it's being revisited and refined? I think that it's been a few years since it was initially implemented. Is that?
Well, that's going to be those attributes are going to be an ongoing living document, because the NIAS visit that's coming up is also going to focus very heavily on the vision of the graduate and how it's being implemented K through 12 and the measurement of it and so on. Because we're right now we haven't resolved all the measurement of those, so there's going to be still a good bit of work on. It's going to take a few years for this to take full traction. So it's not a 1 year thing or an overnight thing.
But are you planning to bring it back for any sort of revision cycle? Can you expound upon that? Because I think that's Greg's question is, are you reviewing it and revising, or is it more just the implementation as a multi-year?
At the moment, it's about implementation, because we just wouldn't be at a stage of revision at this particular point.
Yeah, just like when I read through it, like I thought about, I grew up in Darien, and I know a lot of folks who did and came back, and part of it was like the excellence in the community, and maybe that's embedded within all of these, but like I would think that excellence is something that all of our graduates should be striving for. That can mean a lot of different things to different people, but it's not specified within that vision, which I was somewhat surprised by.
Dave.
So I just wanted to hit on strategy point here, 3B, and specifically talk about measuring and implementation. One question for me, and I think you touched on this just a moment ago, is, we have the strategic goals of the vision of the graduate. How do we know where those are coming from, and how do I tie back to teacher performance? If my kid takes calculus and doesn't learn calculus, either the kid didn't do it or they weren't taught it. If my kid learns to speak with authentic voice, I don't know where that came from. How do I figure that out? So some of these goals are just so broad in the vision of the graduate. Like, how do I know where that's coming from, and how do I know that that's something that's coming from our education system?
So some of the elements of vision of the graduate are not as tangible to measure as some of the things that you've described. And I think that is an inherent challenge in some parts of the work, but arguably some of those tenets are the most important parts of our work, right? Because ultimately children learn content and skills which change over time. Content will change over time, but some of those things become important or remain important when children, long after they finish grade 12 in college and career. So I think, again, we'd want to think about multiple measures to look at all of the things that we're working on as a school system: content standards, these attributes, and potentially others.
But I think I'm thinking a little bit more from the oversight role of the board. How do I make sure that the school district is doing what they're supposed to be doing, and how do I track that and measure that? How do I know? And that's the piece I'm having trouble finding in this plan.
So we're trying to develop systems that will measure curiosity, communication, integrity, resilience, these attributes that have been defined as what we would like our graduates and what they would actually like for themselves, because they haven't given feedback on that as they go out into the workforce.
But can I tie that back to fourth grade social studies, second semester? And so that's where it was learned and developed. So the teacher performed. How do I measure that?
Well, over time, hopefully with the coherence of all the school system pre-K through 12, these are the things that they were trying to promote at each of the levels of schooling. I don't know that you're going to go back to, you could certainly go back to an assessment and say, here's one assessment that was given to measure some indicator of one of the attributes. Certainly we can do that, but I'm not going to be looking at one culminate or one unique event that was the time when everything was
And
mastered.
so from an oversight perspective,
Yeah.
there's an accountability gap there. I'm just trying to think of how to close that.
Sure.
Maybe coming at a slightly different angle, like how do we define success? How are we defining success with the vision of the graduate if we don't have metrics that we can measure?
So there are attributes and characteristics around each of the skill areas that have been identified, and there's descriptors under there of how we would like, what that means to us and what that means that we would like to see in student performance or student character or otherwise. So those attributes are articulated. We don't have an assessment tool ready just yet, but that is part of the work of the accreditation NASC to point us in that direction. It's the work of the high school in particular, to, as part of their self-study, to continue to work on those particular aspects. And so eventually, yes, we're going to have a measurement system for it.
And if I could just add, the child development and learning I mean, it's really hard to find one pinpoint time where you can dial back and say it was that day in third grade, right? I appreciate the question, but the way learning progressions happen is it's developmental and it happens over time, and learning is cumulative. One thing that I would commend the school district for is looking at the vision of the graduate from ELP through grade 12 plus. Many school systems look at the vision of the graduate primarily through high school experience, grades 9 through 12 or 9 through 12 plus. And at that point, then you certainly can't attribute anything that happened in the student's first 9 or 10 years of school, right? So I think the first step is to really think about articulating a curriculum that aligns to these things without compromising standards and excellence. And there are, again, multiple measures that we can look at that might not be as definitive and explicit as you're looking at, but would also be indicating that we're meeting with success as a school system or not. And I think, the question, how do we define success? It's my understanding that that was the original question. That was kind of the impetus for the vision of the graduate. That the group that was first working on this began to explore the concept of vision of the graduate through that lens.
And I don't actually know what the exact solution is, but as you can see, if you're in a certain sequence and it's learn the 5 or 7 or how many are these days continents, and they don't learn it, you can kind of figure out pretty quick, and that's when the failure occurred. And it's hard to do that in this cumulative, ongoing process.
That's the hard part. I think the vision of the graduate is more the soft skills. It's not necessarily I learned the 7 continents in 3rd grade. So I think it's harder to measure that. And then, these kids aren't widgets. You can't slot everybody into a certain
Right.
spot every
And I
time.
guess so then the question with the soft skills is what's the cost benefit and how do we know we're actually getting, if we're devoting educational time to this as opposed to other harder skills, how do we know?
One could
it's worth
argue that
doing?
you want a well-rounded student graduate from public schools.
And we want to embed these competencies within the curriculum so that it's not one in place of the other. They need to be embedded. And part of this is informed by what we know colleges and universities and employers are also looking for.
So I think there's a couple things that are sort of getting knitted together. I do think that I understand why we've gone to this format in terms of being able to read a lot of different words, but there's some difficulty in tracking the work over time and how we're looking at the work from a measurement perspective. So I think that's one of the things I'm hearing. So we definitely have identified that as something to look at so we can talk about, how we're following the work and how we're evaluating it from an oversight perspective. I think the other piece is when we do talk about what I'm hearing us say, when we talk about measuring, it does sound like there is an assessment tool in the works. I do think that, yes, I agree, it's going to be hard to measure soft skills. At the same time, we do measure some soft skills for our kids. Like we have that whole left-hand side of the report card for our elementary school kids. So there are ways. So, I think it's something that we can bookmark that's something we need to talk about specifically at the board table. How do we measure some of those soft skills and how do we believe we're successful in them? Because it's something we're invested in. We've committed the time, the effort, the proverbial dollars to it. So let's make sure that we're happy with it. The third piece, I think, is you're asking Dave also, how does it tie back to teacher evaluation? So I would expect some of that to come up in the PDEC discussions that we'll be having in the spring. Okay. All right. With that, can we move on to the next goal?
Okay, goal 4, expanding the professional capacity of staff. We've already discussed PDEC. The District Technology Council has been relaunched. That's largely led by Tim McGuire and a team of teachers across all grade levels in schools. Part of the PDEC work is to have a shared vision for teaching and learning. And again, we'll be providing an update to the board in short order on that. We've been also thinking about professional development for SCSS teachers aligned to core curriculum and providing job embedded professional learning for our K2 teachers in the science of reading and our K5 teachers in the area of mathematics. Of course, differentiated professional learning in other areas as well that are noted there. Something exciting, Dr. Dad has and our school system has been invited to participate in the Connecticut Psychology Consortium. And that provides an opportunity for her to provide supervision and oversight for students who are doctoral level interns. And the positive of that is that should also create a pipeline. School psychologists are another shortage area and hard to fill, as we've noted. So it's an opportunity for the school system to not only lead in that area, but to be making some great connections with other leaders in the field that are up and coming doctoral interns. We also have been thinking about how we onboard new staff, teachers and administrators. So we revised our New to Darien Public Schools educator orientation program in the summer. Marge has talked about the feedback that we've received from that. And we continue to look at that so that those days are well spent and that we make a very strong first impression and make sure people are supported in what they need to be successful in their beginning days and beyond. And there were successful DAA contract negotiations that were recently completed.
Robin.
Just one quick question, just so along the lines of the onboarding for administrators, do we also have some kind of procedures in place to ensure smooth transitions when people leave so that when new hires take over, they have the materials in place that they need in order to do their job effectively? Because that kind of transition process, as you have turnover, is just as important as the new staff orientation, just to make sure like document retention, file transition, all of those kinds of things as well.
The very short answer is yes, we do. And as I think I mentioned in the orientation, we're doing it more intentionally now because in a perfect storm where every administrator is new in the building, there's no one left to carry on. But we have a very well documented and thought out plan. Thank you.
For administrators and teachers, March? Okay. I'd love to see that showing up in the strat plan, talking about it, please. Thank you for the question. Anyone else?
Just want to make a note of that. Okay, so the next is goal 5. Goal 5 in our strategic plan is on developing and enhancing systems to promote efficiency, coherence, and communication. So we have had parent coffees. Dr. Adley and I continue with Shirley to have monthly CDSP meetings. We had one just today. We've already spoken about the redesign of DPS teacher and administrator orientation program. And we've had successful open houses at each of the schools. The communications committee continues to work on, and those are the main highlights for that goal.
And those 2 dates are changing, right? Sorry, Shirley. And then for the focus groups, is that what you said? They're changing,
Yes.
Ellen? Yeah.
Just to January.
Yep.
In January. So it needs to be marked here, please,
Yes,
and in
it should
the
be. Yep,
previous, in our board goals as well. Please, Shirley.
Thank you.
I'm getting a new mic. So I just wanted to add, just to clarify, the first parent coffee and monthly CDSP meetings. Those are CDSP meetings with our building reps that we have monthly. We're invited to join the CDSP reps for the first hour of the meeting to do updates from Laura, from myself, from Kristen and Scott. So in addition to our regular CDSP meetings, those are our monthly building rep special education meetings
Those are here in the
boardroom. And
Thank you. Anyone else? Robin?
And I mentioned this earlier, but this is the area I think where I had talked about having more of a feedback loop for parents potentially where, you know, teacher feedback, qualitative feedback for middle school or high school, or some kind of a more of a regular communication where the parents can have a one-on-one kind of information session or whatever it would be. That kind of falls within this goal in my mind.
Okay. Is that something that administration is looking at generally anyway? It doesn't appear here as work that was done for this quarter, but is that something you all have identified?
No, I've just noted Ms. Nelson's contributions to the discourse here about those opportunities. I can't say that those things that we have identified, they may come up through certain activities, but consciously, I'm just making the physical note of these things that are being mentioned. So if we can find a way to build some of those in, we would. But some of them are even contractual, to be honest with you. So some of them are more difficult than others. But.
I'm asking the question in part because it would be in addition to some of the strategic work that's been identified based on what you're saying.
Yes.
It sounds like, I think it's something we've heard about for years, kind of the cliff when kids hit middle school. So I certainly don't have an issue with, I think it's important work, but understanding you may have to fit it in where you can. And I just think the board should be aware of it. If we're asking for something else to go in here. Yes, Julie.
We had some discussion on this topic in the curriculum committee a year or so ago. It might have been more than a year ago. And at the time, what we talked about was how the narratives had been added to report cards at the secondary level to get a little more of that. And I think we discussed the role of the student's counselor as a person a parent can reach out to when a student has multiple teachers, as they do when they get to middle and high school. I think it's something that if we want to ask to look into, that maybe we should have some discussion as a board about it so that we know what we're asking to look into collectively, so that it's clear direction.
Okay. So we'll add it for an agenda item at the appropriate time. Thank you for raising it, Robin. Yes.
Just one quick, the open house sessions were also mentioned in here. I would just request that there be consistency in terms of ensuring that teachers review highlights, at least, of the curriculum that would be covered during that year, because I know at the high school level, it was not necessarily consistent when you went from class to class that was done. And especially for parents that might be new to the high school or new courses, it would be helpful to just make sure that there's time spent. It's a short time that you're in each classroom, but just to make sure that the teachers actually give that overview would be helpful.
Was there someone who wanted to add something?
I wanted to go back to idea, but I wanted to wait till it was the appropriate time.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to go back to the question, I think, sorry to go out of order, that Mr. Brown had spoken to Mr. Grambling, just recognizing how do you measure soft pieces, and I didn't want to lose that, especially in recognition of our students who are here and part of our conversation. Just for Mr. Brown and Mr. Grambling and the board to know that we have those conversations often. That very often when you can't have quantitative measures, what do good qualitative measures look like? Very often when you look at measurement or success, you look at how students assess themselves. Trying to measure fidelity or empathy or integrity are ways that you observe. Observation is one way that you qualitatively get that as well. You observe students in their interactions with peers and their interactions with adults, of how they fat and how they work with others in student groups, how they perform in terms of their own assessments. So just know that I'm not suggesting I have an answer to it, but I am suggesting that we have that same question as we look at different ways to assess that.
Thank you. Okay. Next goal, please. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to follow up and say, I appreciate that, Shirley. If you do come up with the answer, please do it soon. I'd appreciate it. But, just as another follow-up, to the point that's made about having a well-rounded student, I kind of like the vision of having an excellent student, person who gets there. And so again, that's another gap you just kind of identified in that, like we can see outside skills, but how do we know we actually brought out the best through these programs? So thank you.
Goal 6.
Mhm.
All right, goal 6 is on student safety and access to learning. We wanted to draw attention to the following highlights. We've completed exterior door projects. The DHS theater project phase 1 is progressing. We're very excited about the new LED video wall donation, generously donated by the Darien Foundation. And as discussed previously, we've completed the accreditation process for school safety and security. So those are just a few highlights.
Any questions? Okay. Goal 7.
And our final goal, goal 7, improving technology to support teaching and learning. We've been working together, Shirley's department and curriculum and instruction, to provide assistive technology training for staff. The budget submissions that you'll be seeing in the FY25 budget are meant to support teaching and learning and to think really mindfully about the use of technology to support instruction. We are looking at usage rates for computer software from an instructional technology lens. We are talking about also how we can use technology to improve communication and to get feedback. So for example, some of the surveys that we've discussed, we have recently reviewed and approved Board of Education policies pertaining to the use of technology and social media. And our staff is completing cybersecurity training through online curriculum and phishing exercises. And I can say that that training was so impactful to me that I went down to see Mr. Adams today because of an email I received to make sure it was legitimate. So it is working for us and staff. So that is just another highlight to focus on.
Any questions on this goal? No. All right. With that, we will move on to the annual special education update. Ms. Klein.
Good evening. Good evening to members of the board, Dr. Adley, faculty, staff, students, families, and Darien community. Again, thank you for the opportunity this evening to share with you an overview of the continuum of special education services and programs, teaching and learning, professional learning, parent and family partnerships, initiatives and updates in the special education services department and student services. So I always like to start with just thanking moment efforts and successes of the teachers, related service providers, para-educators, administrators, and all the stakeholders for their exemplary practices and specially designed instruction and realizing shared goals for students and all learners. If I could take a moment just to introduce the program directors who are here this evening. I'll start with our youngest learners, program director, Laura Straighton, our program director for early learning program, Kristen O'Reilly, program director for elementary, and Dr. Scott McCarthy, program director for secondary.
Mrs. Klein, can I just make a wee editorial comment while you're just doing it there? We did receive some questions from board members. If they are not included in this presentation, they will be included under separate cover.
Thank you, Dr. Adley. I am working from 3 screens here, just so you know, okay? So I will do my best to make this work. Okay, if we can start with the department structure, and just to give some color and understanding to department structure, Laura and Kristen and Scott, in addition to their supervisory capacity for the administrators, did program supervision. For ELP, there are 9 special education teachers, 3 speech and language pathologists, 1 school psychologist, 1 physical therapist, and then itinerant services of OT, teacher of the hearing impaired and teacher of the visually impaired in our ELP program. In our elementary program, there are 29, and thank you, 0.4 special education teachers. There are 16 speech and language pathologists. There are 10 school psychologists, again, contracted OT and PT providers, also for teacher of hearing impaired, or the teacher of the visually impaired when recommended and appropriate. For Middlesex, we have 16 special education teachers, 3 speech and language pathologists, 3 school psychologists, and 1 social worker, and also itinerant services for OT, and any other related services. At DHS, we have 19 special education teachers, 1 of whom is at Fitch Academy, 3 speech and language pathologists, 5 school psychologists, 1 of whom is also at Fitch, 1 social worker, and related service providers of OTPT, and teacher of visually impaired or hearing impaired. We also have an assistive technology expert that provides supports from ELP all the way through 12+. We have BCBAs as well as BCBA and 2 BCABAs that provide services to all 7 schools district-wide. So understanding, again, the robust programs that we have here, just for most people have this information, but knowing that the design of elementary and secondary education is really to look at our continuum from least restrictive to more restrictive programs. That one stopped working. Mark, that one stopped. So if we look at going from general education, the least restrictive program is when students spend their day in the general education program and have speech as a related service. We have that opportunity in grades ELP through 12+, where students will spend their day in general ed, have related services, speech and language, usually in the therapy room. As we go through the continuum, the next would be special education supplemental services. And those are programs where in ELP, we have integrated programs. The hours are designated. You may be recommended for 16, 20, or 22.5 hours. In our other programs for special education services in the general education classroom, those are available in all grades, K through 12+. And then we now have grade 5 co-taught ELA classes. And we, of course, have in our grade 6 through 12 ELA and math classes for services that are received in the general education program. Thank you, Marge. We go on to the next tier, and our next tier is for our special education teachers supplemental services. And if we look again, those are programs where students are now receiving services outside of the classroom. So again, K through 12, we have resource rooms or learning centers. We have our direct reading instruction, as well as our AIM program and our core program, which I'll speak to in more design. Next, we have our modified content courses, and those would be our alternative learning centers in grades 6 through 8 at Middlesex, our comprehensive classes in the high school. Depending on recommendations, those can be from grades 9 through 12. Our comprehensive classes are taught by duly certified teachers in the content area and special education. And when not available, we have 2 teachers providing instruction, which would be a content area teacher as well as a special education teacher. And as we go through the continuum to the more restrictive programs, we have our specialized programs. And those programs are highly designed and comprehensive. Our K through 5 are our developmental learning centers. Our developmental learning centers, just to give some understanding to that, also are our programs currently supporting 19 students. We have 4 classes in grades K through 5 in Ox Ridge. Our ALC programs, both 1 and 2 currently at Middlesex, support 9 students in 2 classes. And our Excel program currently supports 15 students in 2 classes in grades 9 through 12+. The AIM and core programs at middle school and DHS support students that really require a higher level of social and emotional support and developing skills to really access learning in the general education classes. Most students spend the majority of their day in their general education programs and have access to either the AIM Classroom for Learning Center and the Core Classroom for Learning Center, or at other times during the day that they may need just a time to regulate, to debrief, or to spend time just working on their core assignments. The AIM program currently supports 11 students, and the core program at DHS currently has 20 students. So when you look at our continuum of services going from least restrictive to highly supported programs, you can see the array of opportunities we have to really meet the individual needs of our students in all of our programs, ELP through 12. So teaching and learning. So we continue to utilize a number of scientifically research-based programs and methodologies in the area of literacy, mathematics, communication, and counseling. If you look at some of the areas in terms of academic, you can see that in our academic programs, we really look at multisensory reading programs. Those are specifically designed to address the individual needs of students. And in that array of programs, you can see that they all have one common denominator. They're all multisensory. They're all opportunities for students to learn with their strength in which modalities they're being emphasized, and also they're sequential. We have students who are participating and may go through elementary and middle school, still working in a Wilson program or working in a Spire program based on what their recommended programs are. Regarding communication methodology and highlights, you can see here that given the, again, robust speech and language pathologists that we have in the district, using whether it's prompt therapy, whether it's using different PEC system, different assistive technology, the notion that all of our methodologies really are designed specifically for students and what their learning needs are. We also have social thinking that we have modeled on the Michelle Garcia Winter program, and those are also opportunities ELP through 12+ that we continue to provide to students. Our clinical methodology highlights, and we've spoken very often about our DBT training, how fortunate we are to have Dr. Dad here with us also to continue that. The DBT training is also provided to dedicated and designated teachers who work in the core program or the AIM program, as well, of course, all our clinicians and social worker and school counselors. Professional learning. So this year, our focus of professional learning has really been, well, bifold. Connecticut SEDS has a new progress monitoring structures. We recognize that one of the areas that parents have always very, very emphatically said, please let us know, and how can we really see the progress monitoring? Connecticut SEDS has answered this in a new progress monitoring structures to ensure that we are monitoring it with fidelity and that we're using consistent scientifically research-based approaches in doing that. So we have, it's live right now. We are training all of our teachers in utilizing the new progress monitoring system. And our next steps will be to make sure that we invite parents in for the training as well, so they know how to read it from their lens. Ongoing support of co-teaching. And yes, we are really using peer support and administrative support. So we were fortunate to have Dr. Friend for several years working with us, both in the high school, middle school, and elementary school. When we no longer had that opportunity, we looked for our own in-house supports for that. Our teachers, our administrators have been trained in co-taught teaching. Any new teacher that comes on board is trained by our administrators. Kristen works with all the assistant principals to train the elementary level. Scott works with all of the secondary to do the training, and our chairpersons also work with training. The team training that happens every year is with new teams. We try to maintain the same teams year to year, but often that doesn't happen based on staffing and sometimes change of staff. So the notion is your strongest training can happen from peer training. And if you recall, several years ago, we began having our 5th grade teachers go up to 6th grade to learn about how co-teaching happens there. Our 8th grade teachers are already involved in the co-teaching, so they don't have the same need to look at 9th grade, although the scope and sequence does change. So by doing articulation training, by doing peer training, and by doing the administrative training where we rely on our administrators, we have special education administrators supporting elementary. We have our chairpersons in secondary, as well as our program directors. And that has been effective. I think using an outside consultant, we are the first to go to outside consultants when we think we need that. Right now, we are confident that using our in-house people to do the training is the most authentic way to do that training. And that we're going to continue this for this year. We'll get feedback from our teachers. Very often they'll want to watch other teachers model that. Or if there's new teams going on, we know that that training will require much more support from the administration. For assessment tools and ongoing assessment tools each year, or mostly, sometimes it's more than one tool, but this year we have trained all of our elementary teachers on the Pfeiffer Assessment Reading, known as the FAR. It's an understanding, a way to really look at elementary understanding of comprehensive reading assessments. The FAR really is a screener for dyslexia. It looks at monitoring of discrete skills, and it also, in the analysis, designs specific skill interventions that teachers can use. So it's diagnostic, it's interventive, and it requires intervention, and it also is a key screener that has been recognized by the state of Connecticut and other areas that really allows us to look at dyslexic behaviors. So all of our teachers were trained on November 7th training for elementary. We purchased these evaluations last year, so they're ready and willing to go and start administering the FAR. It's used in conjunction with other evaluations. We continue to use the WIAT as an achievement test. We continue to use different aspects of TILS, which really looks at other aspects of reading and dyslexic behaviors. And this will well-round our assessments to better understand student functioning and the level of reading and literacy. You can see pictures here of some of our department chairs who facilitate the professional learning, as well as one of our DLC programs, and Corey Siki, one of our special education teachers, facilitating a literacy instruction and also assessing students in their literacy. Continuing professional learning, dialectal behavior, DBT, and cognitive behavior therapy. This time, on November 7th, we were able to have Dr. Alicia Dad continue to work with DBT professional training with our nurses, and offering that to other new psychologists who have just entered the district. And we also were fortunate to have Dr. Burns, an expert in CBT functioning, also doing professional learning at DBS as well. One of our board goals are transition steering committee update. And as you can see, we did post our membership. Questions have come up in terms of our first meeting was held in October of this year. We established goals for the committee. We have completed a cohort, as you can see, of different members from the community. In our goals, we have to tour local programs, evaluate various curriculum, and also look at curriculum scope and sequence of other programs that are there. The question has come up about parent membership, and yes, that's an essential piece. We already have some parent volunteers. Right now, we're discussing the dynamic of the cohort, so we're speaking about students and learning. That really is a confidential nature. As soon as we look at our needs of our cohort, we will invite parents to join our membership later on during the year. Parent and family partnerships is an essential part of our department. Also, over the last several years, we've really worked on our parent workshops. These are some of the workshops scheduled for this year, as well as just basing them on collective feedback that we had from parents and from colleagues. We also cited collaboration with community organizations. Some of the organizations we're working with are cited here also, including CDSP, the Town of Darien Mental Health Task Force, as well as Thriving Youth and CPAC. Update on elementary principals. So this is the third year of our elementary leadership reorganization. And we are excited to share with you some of the successes and the tenure of our APs and supporting teaching and learning for all students. If you just take a glance at the headlines, you'll see the instructional coaching and professional learning and supervision evaluation of some of the responsibilities of our assistant principals and some of their successes. If we look at our grade 5 co-teaching practices and model design, the coaching that has happened for old returning pairs as well as new pairs of teachers. If we look at the vertical alignment for articulation programs, and that's from ELP going to kindergarten, from 5th going to 6th, and from 8th to 9th. some of what we've extended for both programming and visitations. We look at our extended school year program and their responsibilities in terms of coordinating efforts, in terms of designing and scheduling services, arranging everything from transportation to similar groupings for students to support their learning. We look at their responsibilities for parent and community collaboration, and also the structures that they're responsible for in terms of balancing PPT's meetings. Our goal for this year was 60-20-20, which was to make sure that among the schools where you have the principal and 2 assistant principals, that the special education APs would be doing 60%, 20 would go to the other AP, and 20 would go to the principal. We're not wed to this design. We started with the design. It might be effective to be even more inclusive and look at that ratio as we're going through the year. So we'll be monitoring that and see if we can move towards a different proportion. So that is our goal for this year, to really observe and see how we can support that inclusive policy with our administrators. So trends and budget implications. In the next portion, we'd like to share with you some trends in special education here in our community and also in the state. We'll also provide some of the impact that these trends might have in future planning and budgeting. And we'll start with the district data of students with IEPs, and this is in ELP through 12+. So this graph provides a 5-year look back in and out of district students with IEPs and grades ELP 12+. Just please keep in mind that this is based on a CDAC October 1 report. And if you can note on the data, it is stable between 19 and 20 and 20 and 21 school years. You can see here an increase in students with IEPs that are observed in 21-22. And then you can see the data again are stable between 21-22 and 22-23. Note that for this year, and again, it's not official yet, but it was October 1, you can see that we have an increase of 87 students with IEPs that's observed for this school year. That's 87 as of October 1. We anticipate that number will increase and we'll of course report out. There is no other data from the state yet because it hasn't been reported from other districts or neighboring communities. So we'll have that to look at a future date. This graph provides a 3-year trend in enrollment by percentage of students with IEPs in both Darien and state. And of note, you can see the percentage of students with IEPs in both Darien and the state have increased each year. This graph provides a 3-year trend of in-district IEP enrollment by the number of students with IEPs at each level, ELP, elementary, middle school, and DHS. Again, it's an October 1 CDAC report. So keeping in mind that ELP has rolling enrollment by birth date, and as such, it will increase throughout the school year. Of note on this graph, you can see that middle school and high school data are fairly stable. There is an increase each year noted at the elementary level. Further analysis of these data reveal that the increase observed at the elementary level this year are primarily attributed to grades 1 and 4, with moderate increases in K. But just to keep in mind also, you're looking at October 1 date. So your first grade where your kindergarten is last year, this happens October 1, so you're looking at your incoming first graders. Your fourth graders were your third graders last year. So when you get an October reader, we know that our concentration is really looking at the students in grade 1 and 4, who are the new students coming in from the prior year. Grade 1 actually had 22 students, and grade 4 had 17 students, difference between this year and last year. Middle school had 25 students. And high school had 10 students, I believe. The next data is students with IEPs, ELP, and 12. And if you look at this one, this is local district. This is a 5-year trend. Looking at our local districts, This graph provides enrollments in percentage of students with IEPs, and we're looking at it from 2018 through 2023. Of note, of course, you can see that percentage of students with IEPs increased in every school district over the past 5 years, and that ranges between 0.57% and a 4.13%, the Darien increasing at 3.57% in that 5-year trend. Educational classifications, and again, these are the classifications that are state regulated. This graph provides prevalence rates of exceptionality of students with IEPs in Darien, which include autism, emotional disability, intellectual disability, learning disability, other health impairments, which does include ADHD, speech and language, and other disabilities. A few trends are significant, including there is an increase in the percentage of students with emotional disabilities between 2021 and 21-22. There's also an increase in the percentage of students with autism between 21-22 and 22-23. And there is a decrease in the percentage of students with speech and language impairments across the 3 reported years. One shouldn't assume, but there also may be the relationship between students with autism and students with speech and language impairment, because it may be often that students may be identified with autism that have a comorbidity. They may have a speech and language impairment as well, but they may meet the criteria of a child with autism based on the diagnostic criteria for autism. So you may see a decrease in speech and language, and more children might be classified with children with autism. So that may be a nexus between that. I did want to mention, I know it's come up, that just know in the state of Connecticut, you can only have one primary disability. You cannot have 2 primary disabilities. And at the PPT, that's a very important conversation of, given the information, what is the primary disability, or let's call it the learning difference, that a student has that impacts teaching and learning for that student and understanding. So very often that's a very important conversation, and the team at the PPT will decide which is the primary, and that's the one that does appear in the classification rate for our students. We've been asked also to look at some of the out-of-district continuum programs. We spoke about our in-district programs, but also wanted to have an understanding of what are some state-approved outside programs that districts can recommend. So as you recall from an earlier slide, we showed that our in-district continuum of service with students' IEPs is very robust. There are times, though, that a planning and placement team will say that we don't have an appropriate program for the student and that we need to recommend an out-of-district placement that is state approved. So by Connecticut regulation, we can consider the least restrictive environment that is state approved and services when making a recommendation. Here, if you look at some of the programs, just at the headings, you'll see the state approved specialized or transition day programs, and those that are available to students and that we have placed students in. You'll see there are state-approved therapeutic day programs that also we've placed students in by recommendation of PPTs. You'll look at state-approved therapeutic or transition residential program. Again, state-approved programs, those are residential, and yes, PPTs here in Darien have recommended those programs, and students have had success in these programs. Out-of-state approved therapeutic transition residential programs, there are times where we can't find a program in-state. After we've exhausted, you want programs as close to the family and home as you can have, that we have had to go out of state, and those are some out-of-state programs that our students and families have had success with. There are times when students are in hospital settings, and we provide educational support in those settings. Our out-of-district trends and IEP placements by levels. This graph provides an overview of the number of out-of-district IEP placements by level over the past 5 years. No trend can really be observed by level over the last 5 years. However, you can note that there is variability observed over these years. I would like to note that in 23-24, the data includes students receiving services through the year in which they turn 22, as the state legislation has changed the recommendations that students are able to stay in their programs until the end of the school year in which they turn 22. Prior to this time, it would be the day before they turn 22. Now they're fortunately able to complete their whole year. Another question that was asked to us are unilateral parent placements. So the graph here provides an overview of the number of unilateral parent placements by level. We've also presented this over the last 5 years from 2019 to 2024. Of note, there is a stable trend at the elementary level with decreases in the number of unilateral placements observed at the middle school and the high school level, resulting in an overall decrease in the trend of total unilateral placements. And as we noted earlier, the IEP enrollment trend and staffing impact, knowing that we have an increased number of students, what that would look like for paraprofessionals, or the impact that we see as well as school psychology recruitment. You know, the question might be also of, do we need more teachers? Because that would be a question that one would ask, right? You see 87 more students, how do you do that? So we look at those numbers and analyze that. The data is when you look at students across the elementary school, they're in 5 different schools and we're able to support them with our current staffing based on the grades they're in. So you might have, as you move students up, you might have 3 students in a class, or if a resource room, you might have 4 students. You might have 2 going to 3. So we're able to support that based on our current cohort of students. We will monitor that this year though and see where we are. What we do know based on the recommendations for paraprofessionals and where we're coming in is we do have an increase of students who are moving up from ELP into elementary school. And again, based on the new enrollment, we know we will need paraprofessionals in secondary as well. So in our recommendations, and we'll see as we speak more to that, we appreciate the 0.4 special education teacher. We'll monitor that in terms of the remedy that has for us this year. We'll also look at staffing needs for paraprofessionals to ensure the implementation of IEP recommendations. I think we shared last time, finding paraprofessionals is very difficult, and finding RBTs and even contracted service providers now. So we continue to post those job offerings, and we continue to monitor to ensure that we can have the proper number of paraprofessionals. We still are short of 2 paraprofessionals at Oxbridge at this time. We've been covering it with subs and using that, and we have gone out to 2 other agencies to see if we can possibly get other agencies that are further into the state actually, to see if they can help. The other shortage we've had are school psychologists, as you know, and we've been fortunate to have 2 interns. One is at Hinley and one is at Oxbridge doing a leave replacement for maternity leave for a portion of the year at Oxbridge. But as a result, in our continued review of looking at how we're going to deal with mental health professional shortages, fortunately, Dr. McCarthy and Dr. Dad were approached by the Connecticut Psychological Consortium, which is a partnership formed by well-respected psychologists in Connecticut. Some of the institutions that include UConn, Lehigh, University of Georgia, Syracuse, and Northeastern. And they seek to recruit highly qualified doctoral candidates. And we're excited to say that Darien has been accepted as of last week as a partner in the consortium. We are the only public school district to be awarded this opportunity. So thank you to Dr. Dad and Dr. McCarthy. We're excited. And there is a brochure, but we couldn't click onto that because it is a wrong form of the format, but we'll send that to you if you'd like to see, because Darien is cited. What is that called? Thank you, PDF. It's a PDF instead of what we want it to be. But that really is an important piece to us. It also will ensure that we'll have 2 full-time interns per site. So next year, we know we're already beginning with that. The current doctoral candidates have also been really helpful at Hinley and Oxbridge. Lastly, the glossary of acronyms everyone asks for each year, just for any new members to the board. Those explain some of our jargon and some of our acronyms, and they are part of the continuum of all of our programs that we have here as well, and the state guidelines. Questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for all of that. I'll open it up to the board. Katie.
Thank you, Shirley. I want to say first and foremost that I appreciate the work that goes into this, and I also very much appreciate the improvements that were made this year over past years. So thank you for taking that feedback from the board. Also, I wanted to say that I appreciated the accuracy with which you represented the codification of the law around the age of 22. I think that that has been a little bit confusing for some people, so I appreciate how you represented that. And I didn't get to say this before, but I also want to say congratulations to Dr. Dad. The consortium sounds really exciting, and I'm excited to hear about how that comes along. No surprise, I have several questions for you, but I will be happy to parse them out so that I don't hog the mic. Starting with, oh, I have one more thank you. I'm so excited to hear that the dyslexia screening has made it into the elementary school. I know that that started in ELP several years ago, and I was hopeful that it would roll out. So I'm really glad to hear about that. It sounds like it was very new. You said that just happened earlier this month, correct? Yeah, so I'm hopeful that we can continue to hear updates on how that's going as well. So I appreciate that. Regarding transition, and I understand that this is going to be a larger conversation and presentation once the steering committee completes its work. I'm happy to hear that you guys have gotten underway on that. I did want to ask you about the comments that you made about the timeline of when parents will join. I thought that you had said that the committee might be reviewing student files, so I'm curious, something about the development of the cohort. So my questions were if parents were consenting for their files to be reviewed or how that practice works. And then also understanding that the transition programming and the work of the steering committee would not be limited to the specific cohort of students that are in the high school right now, but would really be planning for a full breadth of students that will come over the years.
So I'll answer that in 2 or 3 parts. The first part is yes, and I'm sure you noticed that, Katie, that we have middle school representatives on that as well. So we have special education teachers in middle school, and we have administrators for middle school. So we are looking at that. The second part, in terms of why we haven't included parents yet, who are going to be an essential part of that, and we have several parents who already volunteered, is because yes, any of the files that we're looking at in our current cohort of who are planning for or about to enter transition programs, everyone who's working on that has a legitimate educational interest in the student. So the same way a teacher will review a file of those students, any of our students who are going into transition program, the speech therapist, the special education teacher, the program director would all work with that student as we look for consideration of different programs we would recommend for that child or what we're building. We have children ready to go in next year. Our steering committee will not have everything ready by next year for some of the students who are currently able to go into, or families who want those students to go into other programs starting next year.
So all those parents are aware that their
Yes.
files are being discussed by the steering committee and that it's up to, okay.
By members of the steering, they may not be all the members of the steering, by those members that have legitimate educational interest in those students and are working to help. They're either going with the parents to visit the programs right now. They're either talking to the parents about some ideas for those programs. So those students have already discussed it with the families. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. If I can just ask one more question on the topic with transition. So I noticed that in the list that you gave about the out of district options, which was overall out of district options, but also included some post-secondary, that there weren't any colleges or universities on that list. So I was curious about how the steering committee will get to that point about being able to guide families and students on options for those programs that might not be degree, but would be certificate in a college and university setting.
The first part of the question is, there are some programs there that are, RISE is at Sacred Heart, so it is on a college campus, just so you know that that one is on a college campus.
But is it,
It's a special program. It's actually part of CES, but it is on a college campus.
okay,
I
so
just
it's,
wanted
so it's
to-
not part of the university?
No.
Okay.
But it is on a college, I just want, because it is an excellent program. We're big fans of RISE. If, depending on parents seeking right now, or as we move forward and study the different college programs, which is part of our search of looking college programs, there's an understanding of when you find a program, often a district is not permitted to pay for college classes, but you can have different levels of support in agreement with families. So those are done individually. So we can't pay, we can, for instance, you can do Norwalk Community College. There is a program on the college campus at Norwalk Community that we can pay for, but schools are not permitted, districts are not permitted to pay for college credit courses.
But that's only if a student has actually received a diploma, correct?
Yes.
So if a student has not yet taken their diploma,
You can have specially designed instructions, you can have different aspects of a college program, but you can't, a district cannot pay for college credit. So there may be programs, for instance, that are special programs, like RISE is an example. Norwalk Community College is an example. There are programs that have a program within a program, and districts can recommend that.
what about the case of dual enrollment?
You can't have dual enrollment.
So I would say that these are good and important questions. I think the question of inclusivity in college and in future employment is a really important one for us to hear about when we hear the transition committee report back. I note that this is the membership, this is the district membership. I'm assuming that you have a number of consultants, and I don't mean paid consultants necessarily, but relationships that you have with DDS, with RISE, with college campuses through our guidance program. So I think it will be very, very important for the board to hear how those relationships are utilized so that our staff has not only the correct expertise to make their determinations, but also develops the correct expertise to support students over time. And so no surprise, but we will be looking to hear that when on the sooner side of a report from this initiative.
And just still to answer the last part of Katie's question also, unless there's another question, which is we're looking at what programs, just so I think it's important you know that some of our parents we work with are incredible researchers.
Sure.
So just so you know, they have shared, I can tell you a list of 10 colleges that we're looking at in our steering committee that has been shared by a very generous parent who has done an extraordinary amount of research over the last couple of years.
Mhm.
So we learned that from parents as well as from different sources and our school counselors.
Yeah, and Jill, I could just say thank you. That was my final question about that, was about what consultants the steering committee would work with. So definitely interested in hearing about that. Thank you.
But know what extraordinary parent resources are.
Absolutely.
Sarah.
Thank you. I'm sure they said in a couple of questions today. I just want to ask, and I don't expect to have the answers to all those questions today. So, we talked earlier about how do we measure success and what does success look like? How do you measure that within your department? And how do we know that what the services that we are providing are what our children need? And how can you talk a little bit to how you measure success?
Talk for a very long time on how we could measure success for many levels. So there's both quantitative and qualitative. So the quantitative ways, of course, we have IEP progress report cards. We have different assessment tools that we use. We use different forms of we use either a WAIT or a WIST or different reading assessments that are used for benchmarks that are beyond what typically happens in general education. So we have the progress monitoring. And those are ways of measuring success in terms of achievement of goals and progress in, I'm using literacy as an example, but it can be in speech and language. It can be in other areas of academics. It can be in social emotional. So we do have probes that we use, and those probes might be again, tools that we use that are done 3 times a year or 4 times a year or twice a year. In addition, we can do formal assessments, and sometimes we'll do that just to go back and look at different subtests in certain areas of achievement tests to see where the child has made progress. You might take certain aspects, for instance, of a key math to see where the child has progressed in terms of areas of computation. So there's different areas to look at for quantitative. I can't stress enough the qualitative aspect of it also, because it's very much how the child sees themselves as a learner. So we can imagine When children have learning differences, it's really difficult for them very often to access teaching and learning consistent with their peers. So part of our biggest responsibility is how do we support children in how they see themselves as learners? And the feedback we get from them of how they feel about their learning and how they feel about their achievement, and where they're able to really say, I've got this strategy, I know how to decode this. I've got this strategy, I know how to speak in a full sentence. I've got this strategy, I know what to do when I can't cope with my feelings. And I know that I can go speak to someone and say, this is how I'm feeling, or I'm so anxious about a test, I'm not quite sure what I could do in order to get myself into that test. So I think a lot of the qualitative data is really students being able to really learn, even at a very early age, about their learning, about their strategies, about their resiliency, about what they need to do to achieve. And also find a balance of knowing that they're working really hard. They're working harder than a lot of their peers very often. And what do we do to support their feelings about that? And how do we give them not only the resiliency, but the confidence to say, I know you're working really hard at getting this. And tell me, you know, what you're able to do and what I can do to support you. So I think their own reflection and their own assessment. I think looking at portfolio assessment is another way to really monitor progress. You know, using standardized benchmarks and we have our, you know, we also have DIBELS and we have different ways of really assessing kids. But another way to really look at it is for kids to present their own performance on portfolios to show you how they learn. And whether they learn by doing a graphic novel, or whether they learn by doing an oral presentation, or whether they learn by recording something because they can't do it in front of you, but they can do it at home. Whatever that recording is, or whatever that opportunity is for them to show you what they know, that's how we monitor progress.
Katie, go ahead. I had a question for you regarding the 60-20-20 model for administrators attending PPTs. How does that work for schools that have big swings in enrollment? For example, say Royal to Oxbridge.
Yeah. Well, ideally, it should be proportionate, looking at that. And again, I think we're really looking at that of how the schools work. For instance, there are some families that have worked with one of the administrators in the building that's going to stay with that family, with that administrator. There are some, often a family will have worked with an administrator with one of their children, and now the second child has entered the school. So I don't know that it's a perfect formula, Katie, and I think we're looking at that. But it should be the idea that we wanted the assistant principal that had the greatest expertise in special education and specially designed instruction to really be a resource to that family. We also want at the same time the other assistant principal and the principal to gain the same understanding of how to support families. So I think the 60-20-20 model was really to have a balance in each building, and it may not be accurate in terms of the number of students, but if you have 65 students in one building who have IEPs and you've got 48 students in one building, you would assume that they would have a similar ratio and proportion of assignments.
Can I pick up on a portion of that question? And that is embedded in that question is distribution. So we saw it by grade level, and that was very, very helpful. Thank you for that. If I cut by building, particularly at the elementary school level, do we have any buildings where we have wildly different populations? And if so, how do we support any building that is differently populated?
So I would say that Oxbridge, probably because it has our 4 DLC classes, has a different proportion there. And we really need to look at that this year. We also have 2 new APs there. And we have a new principal there. So I think looking at Oxbridge is something I know Kristen's working with, and she's there every week working with the team to find out what the balance should be and what level we need for support.
So I appreciate that. Can I push a little bit harder? That's a lot for a building that has a lot of kids, a lot of administrative turnover. Can you talk a little bit more about, beyond just looking at it, actively day to day, what's being done to support that building?
So both Kristen and myself are there to help with the transition. We're also going to be modeling the PPTs. So we're inviting Dr. Lau to come to our PPTs to observe us. I know that that also both APs are doing that with Kristen as well. So I think our modeling is the best way to do that, and for them to participate in our PPTs until they say, I've got this, I know what to do.
Okay, so I'm just going to repeat that. You're modeling PPTs, you're in the building more often. Was there anything else?
Is there anything else? I think Kristen is really coaching and working with both APs to really give them the skills of doing that rehearsing. One of the APs, Maya, really is already, because she spent over a decade in a similar district, she knows a lot about the PPT, whether she ran them or not. It's first language to her. I think for Siobhan, it's a little bit different, so that she may need more of our support than Maya might, and we're sensitive to that. So I think Kristen is balancing her time that way, and I'll be doing that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Lobb spent time, by the way, in his previous when he was doing an interim in Eastchester, so he's participated in CSEs, which are our PPTs.
Okay, great. Julie.
Thank you. But first, just to kind of go back to what Sarah was talking about regarding how we measure success, I think to whatever degree it's possible, it would be wonderful to build some of that in moving forward to this presentation. Due to the nature of special education student services, I understand we spend a lot of time talking about coverage and bandwidth and meeting need and supporting students as they need to be supported. And I just think it would be a wonderful overlay to spend a little time on how students are thriving, where the successes are, a little more vision into what achievements we're seeing and hopes for the future. So I think that would be very helpful. And then kind of a question, kind of an observation on the district data slide, the 5-year chart of students with IEPs, ELP to 12 plus. I did look back a few more years, and this is a big shift already. In the 5-year, we go from 807 students to 969. But if you add 3 more years on that, I think we go from 655 students to 969 students with IEPs. It's a 50% increase in the number of students that we're serving with IEPs. I'm curious if other charts would look that striking if we pulled them back further, state versus Darien, trends in our local towns. And I just thought it was noteworthy because that's a huge growth in students that we're supporting. And, you know, we often say, please tell us what you need, but please tell us what you need because we're here to make that possible.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Great.
Really just piggybacking on Julie stole most of my question, but it really was around like understanding the drivers of that increase. It doesn't seem like it's a Darien specific thing because most of the other towns within Fairfield County seem like they are. So is it a Connecticut thing? Is it a Fairfield County thing? I know you said that 1st and 4th grade had big increases. Is it new folks who have moved to town? Is that what's trying, like understanding it? And then that may help us in thinking about like, what are the budgetary ramifications for this going forward? So we can plan accordingly, to Julie's point, to make sure that we've got the money set aside to be able to support it.
Can you answer some of those specifically? So for example, on the, you know, the kids in elementary school, I appreciate again, the grade level view, but are there, what percentage, if you know, are kids who may have moved into the district more recently versus kids who have been identified in the district? Do we know that information?
I can run that. I don't know that, Jill.
Okay.
And to Mr. Gamley's point, I can run that just to find out it was. I'm not aware of a large move-in, you know, in terms of, if you remember 1 year, there were 68 kids that moved in and we saw that. I'm not aware of that, but we certainly, I don't want to guess. One should never guess. I'll look and see what that enrollment looked like, because I don't know that there was a big enrollment in elementary, Rich, a big increase in enrollment in general. So I don't think that would support that there aren't a lot of new entrants, but I certainly can look at it and see what grade levels they came in also.
Right, because I think it's 2020 to between that, in that year of 2021, between 2020 and 2022, that we had the increase of 64, right? Yeah. So now this 87, we'd love to understand the breakdown.
Just
Thank
to,
you.
to push more on that, do you have any sense, and I don't need specific numbers, but how many of these referrals are coming from parents or coming from, is it more, are parents more aware? And I don't know, is there a trend that you can say just why this 87, it's a huge increase in 1 year. So what's driving it?
Again, I'd have to run the report. I can run parent referrals versus school referrals. And again, one should never guess.
Right.
That said, most referrals that we look at are school referrals. There are parent referrals also, but I'd rather not guess and just run it to see where we are. Also, there's a larger portion of students coming up from ELP. Those numbers have increased in terms of referrals as well. And students coming in, Laura's program has received students that have a higher level of support that's required, so I can look at that also.
We look. There's a breakdown in here, the growth, and here it is. But that's pretty steady. The ELP is 54, 55, 59. So that's a steady, small increase. Is that what you're seeing?
Yes.
Okay. Katie.
A couple of thoughts in terms of, information that maybe you can bring back to us at another date, follow up as Dr. Adley mentioned. I would love to see more information on professional development, both for general education staff in supporting our students within the SES community, as well as the special education staff. I think that this has been asked before, and maybe it's planned, but either a presentation or information on SRBI and 504 specifically would be helpful to highlight those programs. At another date, I think it would be really great to have a discussion with the board about the pros and cons of contracted providers. I think that's kind of a complicated and sometimes confusing issue, so that could be a good conversation for us. I do want to echo my colleagues' statements again, emphatically, when it comes to budget and preparing that I think this board and this district and the town really, really want to support all of our students and support you in delivering services to them. So please let us know what you need. And I know that you had said paraprofessionals were something that you were looking at, and I have seen firsthand how hard the paraprofessionals work. I've subbed and been them before, and they are truly wonderful. They are differently credentialed when it comes to providing services. So if you do need those SETs, please plan for them. Echoing something that we heard from the public comment, I agree that it's really crucial to know the breakdown within some of the categories. I think that the person even referenced, sort of the 8 to 9 categories, depending on if it's Connecticut or who, and having even buckets of which ones are reading and which ones are math, it would really be helpful for us to understand some of those driving issues. And then just 2 last questions for you. In terms of, again, like staffing and students moving up, I'm curious how you build capacity at the middle school and the high school level. You mentioned that the increase was largely at the elementary and that it was spread over 5. So even if we feel that we're okay right now, how do we plan for those students to kind of consolidate at the middle school and the high school? And then last, I was just hoping you might speak a little bit, or Laura, to how the consolidation of ELP is going this year, which is really some exciting news, and I hope we can celebrate those achievements too.
I'll definitely invite Laura to speak, as I know she wants, but before Laura speaks, I just want to say it is extraordinary if you haven't been in Oxford, you have to come by and see the ELP program. It is extraordinary. It's exactly what the design was. It's related service providers and teachers working together in classrooms. It is an opportunity for teachers to teach teachers, speech pathologists to teach. It is this harmony of all these providers in one location. And it really is extraordinary. And not to mention children coming together. So when we were in 3 different buildings, they didn't have a chance to be together. So you actually have other peers you can be with. So it just affords us other opportunities. Laura does have a great room there. So there is this great room there also. But the idea of students coming together and teachers coming together from learn for each other, it really is an extraordinary opportunity. Not to mention it's the most beautiful environment you can ever imagine in terms of just classroom and structures for that. So Laura can speak more to it, but I think it's really, thank you to everyone who was on that committee to build that building. Laura, did you want to add?
So I just want to say thank you for supporting ELP. I think this is, I don't know, I've been here, well, I started in 2005 in the preschool. So it's really exciting. We started at Hinley all those years ago with a few classrooms. And then from there, we spread our wings into 3 schools. So it's like wonderful. It's a dream come true for me and the teachers to all be together. Like Shirley was saying, it's really collaborative, supportive. There's a lot of team teaching and talking back and forth professionally. And then also, it's really great to have our paraprofessionals together because that also is a collaborative, nature and teaching them as well. And the children, they get to see different children across the 9 classrooms that we do have. The common room is amazing. We also use it as like kind of a sensory area. We have little sensory stations. We have a closet. So exciting. A closet, and we can wheel things in and out of it, and organization. So it's really, like I said at the beginning of the school year, on the first day, it was a dream come true. And really it's been wonderful. And the playground, and it has a fence and, like all these wonderful things. And we have area that they can ride their tricycles and play ball. And then the footing, where the equipment is spongy. We don't have to worry about wood chips. It's accessible for all children. So I'm very happy. So thank you. And I think the families are, the teachers, and, you can see it in the children's smiles. So again, thank you for that. Any questions?
Laura, can you touch on the any sort of professional opportunities you have all your professionals in one spot, plus you have all the kids in one spot? What has that meant for opportunities for staff to work differently?
Yep. So I think, so having the classroom teachers, we're really thinking about when we're evaluating children, the cohorts of students. And sometimes we're a little tied to different elementary schools. So really it's more flexible and where I have more choices to really have a better fit for children. I think for the evaluation teams, we can really team nicely and, develop each other's evaluating skills a little bit deeper. The paraprofessionals, if we're short a para, or someone needs to go train with a related service provider, we have that flexibility to send a paraprofessional, across the hallway as opposed to sending a paraprofessional from another school. So that is an afforded opportunity that's really been beneficial. As the school year grows, we'll see how that, the coverages work out. But it is helpful to have everyone together because it's, like I just said, I'm going to repeat it, like more opportunities for support and collaboration across the 9 classrooms and training, actually. So, it's been great. Any other questions?
Thank you.
I just add one more thing too, Laura. The other piece it has afforded opportunity for is for some of our students who were in ELP last year and now are in our Developmental Learning Center program. We've been able to, and in terms of memorandum, be able to use some training and some turnkeying. So they happen to be students who are in their DLC program or in the general education program. We've used Paris to help support transition. We've used Mariah, the psychologist, to really help students really regulate themselves as they go into kindergarten. We've used the SLPs to train the other receiving SLPs for some children who may be nonverbal or may not have that language ability. So imagine Laura's kids spent 2 years or 2.5 years in ELP. They come into kindergarten and we don't know enough about them. So having them in the same building, we've been able to really kind of have a hybrid between the 2 programs to really support them. So that's been really extraordinary. So, and she's been sharing some services as we transition in turnkey. So that's been really helpful.
I was just saying, next year it'll be a little different because the whole school is seeing some of our learners now. So I think, since Oxbridge is complete, that transition and that collaboration and training between preschool and kindergarten is going to become more natural because we're there in full force.
Thank you. Dave?
Thank you. Couldn't resist one last data question. This may not actually be to you, Shirley, may actually be to Rich. I'm just trying to think from sort of like a company and a financial service, a service provider. And then we're providing services here and we had some changes to our tracking system. Is it just a question, Rich, is it evaluation of operational controls? Is it best practice? Is it testing? Like, how do we make sure that the new system we put in is tracking and doing what it needs? And sort of testing on that. And maybe that's a question for later, but I just wanted to throw that out there for now. And I can follow up if you want to try and narrow that down. Sure. Just probably different terminology. You can probably do this quick. Thank you.
Dennis?
Thank you. Yeah, I just have a couple of questions. One is really simple, the unilateral placement. We have 44 as of 1 month into the year. Is that typical for us, or do we expect that number to grow? Or do you think we'll be in line by the end of the year with our past 4 years of history?
It's hard to know because things happen. Children have different needs, so it can, but usually you see those trends. You don't see that many, unless there's some significant events that happen, you don't see that many movements in the middle of the year for those placements. Most students start with our placements at the beginning of the year.
Thank you for that. That was my thought, but I just wanted to clarify that. Just two other points. One is I want to echo Katie that I think I'll take a miss on my part. I think we should put on our master calendar that we should have SRBI kind of enrolled with it, entwined with this, because I think it's hard to not look at them together for me. And I would really like to see them together, whether it's maybe we do it a previous meeting or the meeting following. But I think it would help me for that. And then my third point is, and looking at this 5-year district data, I'm just struck by the fact that New Canaan was low 5 years ago, and they're continuing to be low. I mean, we were 3 percentage points above them 5 years ago, and now we're 6 percentage points above them. I don't. What are they doing that we're not, or is it just a blip of the data for that 5 years?
So I can't answer what they're doing that we're not doing. I can only answer by saying it's a different cohort of students. I don't know what their practices are or what their opportunities are in terms of assessment and evaluation. I can say that they were lower to start than we were also back then. Their numbers were lower. But again, it's a cohort of students. I can say that we refer and evaluate children with fidelity. We make sure that we are responsive to parents and to evaluation requests. And I don't know enough about their process, Dennis, to respond of why their numbers are lower.
Thank you.
I also don't know how many students they have in district. They may have different amount of students that are out of district, where if you can see just in terms of our comprehensive learners, I mean, we have extraordinary programs of our in-district students. And many of those students may be students that they are not in their programs. They'd still be classified with them, but I don't know how they handle their numbers.
Oh, fair enough. Thank you, Shirley.
Right. I know there's probably, did you have a question, Brenna? Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Brenna.
I was just wondering if there's any ways that we see that we can further increase the connection between students with these IEPs and 504 plans and between the teachers. Perhaps on a more personal level, I really do think it's something of great importance as a student with a 504 plan, as a student with special needs and with an IEP. I really do see that significance between, as someone who I'll be at work for hours and my pencil won't leave the page, and I do appreciate the recognition of, all that hard work that goes into being a student. And I just want to reiterate that maybe we tend to look more shamefully or maybe with some sort of guilt with these learners, with these these differently abled learners. But I really would want to encourage us to, take pride in our students with these different abilities and yeah. Just wanna-
I share that commitment and that belief, Brenna.
Yes, as does the board. Thank you.
As does the board.
Mhm. It's important.
Right.
I have taken a note for the switching gears for the SRBI, Dennis and Katie. I do agree that we need that as a future agenda item, probably on the sooner side.
And Amy and I glanced at each other
saw.
in terms of doing that, so we'll make sure that we address that sooner than later.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay.
I just wanted to add one thing, which doesn't appear in here, but I think just Dennis made me think of this, actually, this piece, just to give you an idea of the commitment of our district to really supporting all learners, and to your point also, but to make sure we have all our learners. Just to give you an idea, and I know excess cost is something else that you speak about at a different time, but just to give you an idea of our district, which is something to really take pride in. In our excess costs, and Rich, tell me if I'm right on my numbers. We have our excess cost, 43 of our excess cost students are in district. Just to give you an idea, not out of district. We are able to educate our students in district, 43, and I think 23 or half of that, 23 are out. So just to give you an idea of out of district programs and in district programs, what an accomplishment that is that we can have. You would think it's the reverse, right? But 43% of our 43 students are here in district in our excess cost cohort, and 23 are out. So I just wanted to point that out. That's because of the programs that you've supported and allowed us to do, and what we've been able to do to keep children in their community school. So thank you.
I think that raises a point that was raised here at the board table, which is how do we define success? And I think you answered it beautifully for when we look at individual children. But I think when we look at the Darien school system and we say, how do we define success? I think some of the answers that maybe we should talk about explicitly next year are the integration between general ed and special ed as a foundation. And what does that look like? I mean, you've got some of it in here, but it's the number of kids that we have in the least restrictive environment. I think that's another leading indicator and an important indicator. It's having the right number of cases of appropriate caseloads for our staff and making sure that they're supported correctly. So some things like that, I think, as we move forward, what you just indicated about being able to service as many kids in district, in their home district, if they'd like to be, those are important things for how we as a board look at special education. Of course, there's always areas of growth, but there are some things that we do and should talk about. Okay, anyone else? Okay. All right. Discussion on 24-25 budget initiatives. Dr. Adley, last time we talked about our core growth. The purpose of that discussion was just to say if we did nothing, what would happen. It was a fairly brief discussion. I think this will also be fairly brief. This is just some things you're contemplating, correct, Alan?
This will be brief, yes. The board has asked over the years, could I just give a wee heads up on some conceptual things that are going to be in the budget? So this, it's deliberately vague for a number of reasons. A, it's still a work in progress. The board receives it as its Christmas gift on the 22nd of December. So if we work backwards a little bit, we have to have this wrapped up pretty soon. Administratively. However, it is still a work in progress. There are things here that if I talked about, I would be naming people and positions, and it would just not be appropriate to do that. A, because it's not finalized, and B, if there are changes and so on, that there are processes that we need to go through in order to notify people or otherwise if there were changes. But it will give you a wee sense of the themes that are in there. I have shared here that it focuses on the retention and recruitment of staff. If I were to put down a secondary theme there, it might be that the reinvestment in areas of the middle school. So just looking at this, I've just listed, as I've done before, the items under the strategic goals per se. You could take them out of the strategic goals, but for the purpose of this presentation, the new course offerings that have come across to the board, they're approved, but they're not necessarily approved in the budget per se, but they are as part of this particular budget process. You've heard of the special education, the additional students we have. It includes the 12 additional paraprofessionals in there. It includes tuition increases. an offset for excess costs. There's a lower projected cost at this particular point. So those are for those address the special education needs, which we would always do. The support for clinical staff, you've heard about this. We've been accepted as a partnership for the Connecticut Psychology Consortium. That is good because that sort of addresses sort of benchmark strategy that for the board that it has. We will receive 2 psychologist interns as part of that particular process. So we're pleased about that development. The support for mental health will be primarily at the middle school. That will be, again, an area in there. Think of things that we've done, Teen Talk, different things, give you a wee bit of an idea. The goal area 4 is retention and recruitment of teachers administration. Based on exit interview data, we have reviewed the secondary administrative structure. When I say secondary, I mean middle school and high school administrative structure, along with the special education administrative support. And we'll be looking for different areas there for administrator and teacher leadership opportunities. So there will be, at this point, if it plays out, there will be some sort of reconfiguration there to consider. We have, as part of the DAA contract, increased the elementary assistant principals, increased their work days. So that's a helpful thing because it also improves planning and extended year program planning. But that's also part of the contract, which contributes to this particular budget. If you remember, we were starting off with the base somewhere between 6 and 8. So you can understand the challenges that we have. The teacher administrator contracts, as they are, they address the needs of recruitment and retention, and we appreciate that. And obviously, that's included in the budget. We also address in this, are proposed to address in this budget also the substitute shortages that we've been experiencing. So the coverage for staff is a recruitment retention issue. So we intend to redirect money from other funds for that. This budget also reallocates resources. So it uses the funds differently based on our needs. And you'll see some of that in the actual budget. We understand that the difficulty of the budget, so we are going to try and reallocate resources where those needs happen to be. We are reviewing the enrollment and class sizes. I'm reviewing the middle school class sizes according to the board's policy. And we'll also be looking at some of the scheduling of the special areas at the elementary school. So in order to do certain things, I got to look at areas of efficiency. So there's one that's underway at the present time. And we'll see what that brings to the table. Out of district transportation needs, we have a fleet already of transportation for that. There's an opportunity here to provide additional transportation in an alternative way for our students that would realize some efficiencies. The security improvements, the infrastructure and personnel, some of that you did here tonight. Kevin's patiently there waiting in the wings to do his presentation, so you'll hear about that. Under the facility improvements, some of those are things that have popped up, and others are things that have been long time standing. I will say that there's presently a groundskeeper as part of that particular proposal. And the school and library theatre improvements, the theatre improvements were phase 2 that we said we would do. The high school library is the carpet, some mobile bookshelves. We've deferred the actual project itself, so we're doing some of the other things as part of the capital plan. So that's the big overview. Happy to answer questions as sort of vague as it might be, but
yeah, I mean, if there are questions, again, this will appear specifically in the budget. Alan is still in the process, right? So we don't know exactly what will be in the final budget book yet, but this is your sort of directional.
Yep.
But with that said, are there questions on this list? Greg.
Maybe just a suggestion. In looking at this, I think it would be helpful as you're preparing it, like you have the different goals and you have different details within those goals, just to specify like what is the capital or what's the cost of those, if that's even possible, so we can figure out capital allocation, like how are we actually allocating it between the goals to assess like where are we actually gearing the capital to achieve those goals versus not.
So they don't put the numbers in at the moment because it's sort of, it's not really a straight line in terms of, I understand the question, I respect the question. There's with an administrative restructure potentially, there's just different connotations to that and different variations of it. But yeah, I hear the question, but.
Well, I think there's two pieces of the question, which is in terms of the timeline. Yes, at this stage, we are prior to the actual budget being rolled out. So that's why you're not seeing specific line items, but also the way we roll the budget out is RC by RC. So it's more like building related or area of responsibility. And it doesn't actually tie back to the strat plan. That would be a bigger effort. It probably won't happen this year, but I think that is a wise way of looking at the budget. Does our capital align with what we prioritized? And there might be a shortcut we could do this year for some better planning.
Yeah, like if 90% of the capital is going towards one plan or one part.
Oh, right. Okay.
Like that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Thank you, guys and gals. Discussion on October 2023 financial report and possible action on proposed budget transfers. Mr. Rudel, and we did do this or the finance subcommittee did do this. Did I skip it?
Yeah.
I did skip it. I crossed it out. And
It's time to
okay.
go.
Sorry, Kevin. You do need, yeah. It is time to go home. Presentation of updated 5-year capital plan, Rich and Kevin.
I thought I was off the hook.
Yeah.
This is the subcommittee one?
Pardon?
This is it.
Kevin, can you pull that can you slide that in here? Just a wee bit. There you go. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. How's that better? Thank you much. So last week, the facility subcommittee met to discuss the packet that you have tonight, which, as the memo indicates, reprioritized the priority 1 capital plan for various reasons, whether that was new initiatives, urgent or emergency type response to projects that needed to get moved up the ladder, or as Dr. Hadley just teed up very nicely, the libraries getting rethought and re-envisioned. So we went through each building in detail last week, starting with the high school and how we broke out a very large library project into 4 smaller bites, if you will. And then we moved on into the middle school, which has also added another memo to the back of the packet as far as 2 potential options for timelines on a middle school renovation type project. So what we did is we highlighted a full-scale renovation versus a maintenance type renovation based on how the board would like to proceed. In the interest of time, if you'd like, I can go line by line, or if you would just like to ask questions.
Summary is great. You can just keep going with your summary.
Excellent.
Thank you.
So as we also just mentioned, there are other items in the capital plan that were moved up, unforeseen, such as classroom furniture replacement at the high school. We were encountering issues over there that we identified as a rather urgent need, and this addresses those needs. Other security type concerns, whether it's a wall replacement or rebuilding the chimney over at the middle school, certainly need to be addressed in the upcoming fiscal year. Last but not least is the district-wide or the maintenance equipment that we have. Also included is the out-of-district transportation. Those are being prioritized for next year in order to save costs or to better align us with the needs of the fleet.
Thank you. Are there any questions or anything else, Alan, you guys want to add? No? Great job, Facilities Committee. All right. Dave.
I would just say great job. And it's interesting that the roof replacement went into building a new middle school pretty quickly in that meeting. So I think that illustrates the point that sometimes things that happen to the subcommittee a little unexpected wind up perking to the board. And we should maintain that flexibility from the subcommittees as it informs our work.
Sounds good.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I would just note the I think it's 900,000 or so for security improvements thereabouts, or
950 to $1,050,000.
So just how we deal with that within this.
Yes. Talk about that next meeting. All right. Discussion on October 2023. Thank you, Kevin.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate it. 2024 financial report and possible action on proposed budget transfers. Rich.
So this is the financial report through October. We are forecasting a deficit of $614,747. It is an improvement from the prior month. The general education RCs are positive by just over 61,000, and the special education RCs are in a deficit of 675,000. Overall, salaries are forecasted at a deficit of just under $84,000. The largest part of that is turnover. We have not met our turnover credit that was budgeted. That is in part due to hiring more expensive teachers than those who have left. We do have salary savings of just over 100. The board did approve the 0.4 special education teacher. And then we have saved a little bit of money in clubs and councils and new salary schedule. And then we did have one lower enrolled elementary class. Operating is forecasted at a deficit of 638,000. This is primarily due to the special education consultant line item, which are those contracted RBT support staff, and the special education tuition is a deficit of $283,000. Fixed is the one area of positive by about $109,000. We do have some savings in health insurance due to census changes. Student accident insurance is slightly positive, as is property and workers' compensation. Equipment is slightly positive as well. We did have a better price point for some computer equipment, and so that did save $12,600. Revenue overall is roughly flat, but down $14,000. ELP tuition is short by $15,000, as we did have students classified as special education. And then excess cost is less than projection by about $22,000. The threshold was set, and it was slightly higher than anticipated. So there are two transfers for the board's consideration for approval. The first is for $63,856 into the tuition line item. This is just to partially offset some of the deficit that we mentioned earlier. And this is to take funds from salary savings associated with unaffiliated salaries. And then we had a liability, auto, and property savings credit from KERMA. And then the second transfer is for $35,161, and this is again to partially offset consult services and special education. And we are recommending taking the funds from those technology savings I mentioned earlier, as well as the additional revenue that was generated from Darien Summer School. We did mention this at Finance Committee, but just to note, we are taking from areas that we know are essentially set in stone. DSS is over. We purchased those laptops. The credit's been received, and the salary savings for unaffiliated staff is already set.
Board questions?
Just the finance committee did suggest moving these forward.
Yes, thank you. Okay. With that, may I have a motion to approve the October budget transfers? That is Dave, seconded by Robin. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Marge, personnel report.
So we do continue to work to fill all the positions. I think, as I mentioned in new board orientation, we're fully staffed with people who let us know they were leaving in a timely manner. Where we're struggling and where other districts around us is when people tell us in September or in October that they're leaving, those positions we continue to struggle. And also, I think that the paraprofessionals we're having the biggest trouble hiring are the contracted ones, where, as you can see on this report, we filled two internal, our employees during this time period.
Any questions?
Katie.
Marge, how many positions are we still looking to fill currently?
We have two special education positions at the high school. We have a psychologist at Tokenique, and that's another one, and we're very close to a library media specialist at the high school. And then we have short-term leaves, and those are going to be problematic going forward because everyone has jobs. So we're doing the best we can to cobble together. Our teachers are filling in for people. We're doing the best we can.
Okay, public comment. Michelle.
Good evening. If anyone in person would like to participate, please come up to the podium. You have up to 3 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record.
Joanna Walsh, 17 Pleasant Street. I just have a couple of questions about the unilateral placement slide from the special education presentation. Are these numbers just new unilateral parent placements, or are they total for the year? Because if it's all placements, and the numbers are so much lower than past years, I don't understand how $338,795 of the projected deficit is from unanticipated unilateral placements. I think it was 7 in the report from the October financial report. And then at the November 14th meeting, in the special education slide about core expenditure projections for next year's budget, it also said that unilateral placements have risen 41% just when you correct for the fiscal year 24, which is what we're in right now, I think. And the anticipated placements are still going to be another $636,770. So if the number is, anywhere from 12 to 20 numbers less, how are these unilateral and anticipated placements, which could be unilateral or could be IEP? So, such a driver. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in person? If anyone online would like to participate in public comment, please use the raised hand icon. There are no raised hands at this time.
Let me have a motion to adjourn. That's Julie, seconded by Dennis.